Hello and welcome to As an Aggregator here. Today we're going to be going through my subscription box for the past week, starting in about 30 seconds. And we're going to actually, what are we going to do? Do we put on In Class with Car?
Annual UN International Day for Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade became a site of growing demand.
This success goes to all of you, but most of all it goes to those who people wanted to be forgotten. This has gone on a record, and the record of the universal body that we all accept, the United Nations, that this was the gravest crime against humanity. Our ancestors must be rejoicing in their graves. And all the torture and adversity they went through, they must be happy that this day the world has recognized that they are not forgotten, and that the pain they went through and the torture they went through has been recognized by the United Nations, the world's highest body that we all ascribe to. Before we went to the UN today, we went to the African burial grounds, and we all know the history behind the African burial grounds. We said Christian prayers, we said Muslim prayers, we said traditional African prayers. We poured libation and called on our ancestors to stand behind us in what we're going to do today. And today, I think that they answered our call. Yep. And we achieved success. But this is not the end. This is the beginning. What we've achieved today creates a platform for the struggle for reparatory
So we're
justice.
scrolling through right now
And
to
so
get
we must not
over
rest
like
because we have achieved this success.
7-8 days.
We must take this success and begin to work so that those
And we're
who
listening to In
denied
Class
our
with Car,
ancestors their humanity, those
episode
who denied our
number
ancestors their dignity,
300.
can accept the truth that this is what happened. The revisionists and all those who would seek to erase them out of the footnotes of history. Today, we've accepted that this was a grave crime against humanity, the gravest indeed, and that the next steps in terms of reparations, in terms of justice, in terms of apology, are what we need to work on. And we need to keep this coalition. We can't achieve it alone. This victory is not for Ghana. We did it for the whole Africa and all people of African descent. And I believe that if we keep this coalition, we will take the next
Episode
steps
number
together.
316.
And I'm sure that the unity that we have shown will lead us to the end, so that at the time that we have gotten to the destination, our ancestors, humanity, and their dignity will be restored once again. Today's victory is to ensure that we do not forget, and will never forget. As long as this resolution has been passed, our ancestors will never, ever be forgotten.
Good everything, Dr. Carr. Good everything.
Get everything, Professor Hunter.
Yes. Hi.
Hey, you
So-
good?
Yeah, I am. How are you?
I'm doing just fine.
You look
beautiful.
You look just fine.
You look wonderful. Oh, yes.
So that's the president of Ghana. I know about this. Were you at the African Burial Ground?
I wish I could have been. No, I knew about it. I really wanted to go. Would have been good to see my friend Johnny Cleckley, who's the lead ranger there and responsible for that region.
Yeah, you're
Hamilton
there every
Styles
year.
covers.
You
Yeah.
yeah, you've been
Well, used to be.
there.
Used to take first year students there from Howard every year until Howard University and its neoliberal wisdom, anti-African wisdom, decided to take the freshman seminar from us. But we still go. And Nkechi Taifa was there. Sister Nkechi was there, and a lot of other people.
Larry Daniel Favors was there as well.
Yes,
I was tuning in to Urban View, channel 126. We're talking Powers Becomes Action. And she was going through, she actually played this as well and talked about, both the protesters that were there, which is weird. Like, okay, so reparations you wanted, but you want to argue. Anyway.
We'll talk about them today.
Yeah,
they're sick. Yeah. They're sick, and we're going to get reparations for them too. It's all right. They'll be rehabilitated.
Listen. We ain't got time for all of the nonsense at this point.
No, I have to have time as a teacher. I have to have time.
Not for the nonsense. I'm saying yes. Go. Let's go. Let's do all of the things you're going to do today. But there was a vote. There was a vote, right? 123 member states, and this is the African. Was it everyone was part of the UN? It was the UN resolution A80 L48. They all voted.
123.
123 said yes. This is the greatest crime, the gravest crime against humanity. 52 abstained, including Egypt. Interesting. And 3 countries voted no.
Including the one that has us hostage. I know y'all love America, but I don't know why. I do know why. Just education and the severing of continuity.
Okay, that's so I'm going to be...
That's why we're here.
Simultaneously listening to In Class with Carr while trying to get these playlists
the ones who abstained, either because they are beholden to the United States, as Sisi is in Egypt, or because they are still white nationalists and they are the main ones responsible for the human trafficking for all of our descendants of slaves friends who somehow think that they are foundational, I think, Black Americans. This is not where the crime started. So shout out to all the abstentions. And that would be Albania, Andorra, Armenia, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Cambodia, Canada, Croatia, Cyprus, Czechia, the Czech Republic used to be, Denmark, the Danes, Estonia, Fuji, Finland, France, Georgia, Germany. We'll come back to Germany when we talk about Brian Stevenson in a minute. Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Montenegro, the Netherlands, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Norway, Oman, Palau, Paraguay, Portland. I'm tripping. Poland. The Polish, shout out to Lech Walesa, Portugal, Republic of Moldova, Romania, San Marino, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. Shout out to all you who stood on the fence of world history because either you are beholden to the United States of America or because you are actually racist. And in the case of Germany, since nothing bad ever happened there, we understand that you are in solidarity with your colonial power European friends. Every state in the European Union abstained.
They could have voted no. Like maybe. The United States, Israel, and Argentina. So what's the distinction for you between the no votes and the abstentions?
Well, the no's are just purebred racists. Malay, who has $20 billion of our tax money as we speak in Argentina, who spoke at the CPAC Hungary white nationalist internationalist convening last week in support of the white nationalist who's running for re-election, Viktor Orban in Hungary. But, Steve Bannon and his crew was there. The son of BB, the butcher, was there. Netanyahu was there in Hungary. So I understand Malay. Malay's a white nationalist. He's the Trump of the tropics now. And, with the exception, as I mentioned, of that country and one other that abstained, Latin America came in strong on the side. After all, the blood of Africa runs through every country in Latin America. And of course, Israel as a settler colony state, which has the right to exist like every other country, but certainly not a right to engage in genocide, which we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of the definition of a moral crime which transcends whenever it occurred, which is the United States' argument as to why they didn't vote for it. We'll come back to that quote in a minute from the white nationalist representative from the United States, the UN. And it's the same excuse that France gave. It's the same excuse that all the EU countries gave, namely that there was no international law in place when the trafficking occurred. But finally, the distinction I would make between a no vote and an abstention is the no vote is 10 toes down against the resolution. And it is against the resolution. As I said, the fig leaf they're using is that there's no legal structure or framework for it. The abstentions work both ways. For the open supporters of white supremacy who are using the law as an excuse, it presents to them as an act of betrayal.
But
so in other words, Bozo Trump, Malay, BB, the butcher, will look at the abstentions as you're not with us completely, even as you're beholden to us and you didn't cave to the economic pressure and to the political pressure. For those who voted yes, which is the whole world, they will look at it as an act of, not as an act of betrayal, but as a, hey, for the Europeans, they're gonna look at it as, yes, that's what y'all did because y'all don't want trafficked us, okay? But for the rest of them, they're looking at Sisi like, yeah, man, we know. One day you're gonna come over, one day you'll come. But right now, the fact that you didn't go all the way over there, we know why you didn't go. It's the same thing many of us say when we go to our friends at work who come in as the supervisor and say, look, I don't want to dock your pay. But yeah, don't say nothing else. Just go ahead and write it. We know. It's the same. So I think that's the distinction I would make between the two.
What precipitated this vote? What was there pressure? What happened?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that because this is the second decade of the UN decade of Africa. They renewed it for an additional 10 years. This is a moment when the geopolitics make a statement like this possible. And make no mistake about it, President Muhammad came with the backing of the African Union, which has a lot of problems, a lot of contradictions. I wouldn't shrink from any of the criticisms of the African Union. At the same time, just as in the days after World War II, and the anti-colonial movements that began as soon as these terrible formations tried to impose their will on the world, when they fight each other, whether it be World War I, whether it be World War II, in terms of Europeans and the colonial powers, those who have been subject to that, who have been victimized by the historical circumstances that led to the rise of Europe, which is quickly ending. This is why, again, I think it's very important that we've been reading chapter by chapter, page by page, Howard French's excellent book, Born in Blackness, because it shows you a lot of this is just historical accident. But as this thing unravels, the age of Europe is very close to an end. It gives breathing space to the whole world to push back in ways that are arguably more effective now and more possible now than at any other time in world history prior to the creation of the contemporary global social structure, which never existed before this in terms of human existence. So it's easier now. The United Nations, which the white nationalists say is a useless, ineffective organization, and I embrace and agree with them that it is, if we're using their lens, which is, of course, the lens of fragile white nationalism that is collapsing as we speak. You never want to be in front of the whole world, even if it's in front of the states into which the whole world is organized. Because again, the nation state is a very recent formation in terms of human social structures. And that's another reason why now you didn't see nation states before the last 500 years. And here at the end of the cycle of the age of Europe, if we survive nuclear war, that is, as a species, the framework provides a voice for ostensible representatives of each of the countries into which the 8+ billion people of the world have been formed. And it was very inspirational, very instructive to see the debate, not even the debate, the discussion, not even the discussion, the statement of support, the statements of support that came from many countries in the wake of President Muhammad's introduction of the resolution. And the resolution, to be clear, as the Reed went through, who was a commissioner, of course, on the New York State Commission for Reparations, the resolution itself, which was delivered to be very specific on why this past week and why that day, specifically the 25th of March, 2026, which is the United Nations International Day of Remembrance for the victims of slavery and the international slave trade. This was agenda item 119 on the agenda, and it was, I think, the 19th of these days that has been put into place since the first day was agreed upon by the UN. So that's why it was on the 25th, on Wednesday the 25th. But the reason that this resolution was introduced and the discussion that came after it was had is because not only of the day, not only of the possibility, but we're in the middle of the end of Europe in terms of European domination, in terms of white domination, and they're fighting. So Ghana is taking a representative lead, and it's very important to understand that. So if you got a chance, if you hadn't get a chance, please watch some of the conversation that was had after. Watch President Mahama. That wasn't the introduction, what we just saw. What we saw, that was after the introduction. He's at a private kind of meeting, and he's giving some remarks on the historical significance. But if you watch him introduce this resolution, which was a resolution to declare the trade in African people, the human trafficking, which in the resolution restricts it to the transatlantic trade, even though we know it was transoceanic, not just the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea. But the language of the resolution targets the Atlantic, in part because, of course, Europe is the main perpetrator. We have not forgotten Islam, haven't forgotten the Arabs at all. All that's folded into the conversation. But, oh, go ahead.
No. I wanted to ask you another question, but continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, jump right in, because we having conversation. This is the beautiful thing about it. As we enter our seventh cycle, 6, 7, we're gonna get to that too.
Yeah. 6, 7.
Nonsense word for a nonsense time.
Yeah. Oh, the irony. As I'm processing and I'm thinking about all this, reading Howard French, not just this book, his book on Nkrumah, the Second Emancipation, it's frustrating to not be able to have nuanced conversations with the masses. We always get ham-hocked or railroaded into these very binary, very rigid ways of seeing this, not very complicated, but very nuanced terror that was exacted upon human beings for centuries. How do we drown that out? For people who are here in class with Carr, maybe for the first, second time, maybe here to troll, maybe here to, actually learn, how do we get them to turn down the volume on the nonsense that you are going to address today so that we can actually have a conversation that leads to some resolution, not just a resolution with a vote, but some resolution in terms of how we move forward
Closer yet to the body and bone
to actually build the kind of world we all
soil
deserve to live in. Or maybe we don't deserve to live in it, but I know I want to live in it.
Means machines
that's a good way of putting it. Maybe we don't
initially by humans.
And that's not a decision.
So they have this idea that AI is like an encyclopedia.
The Earth will be here.
It's not an encyclopedia.
The question is, will the human beings be here? So the Earth may get rid of us all. We've talked about that many times. But how do we do that? I think we do it first by being here. We're here every week. And shout out to everybody. I see people in the so-called chat, the Mbangi as we call it in Nubia, who thought they missed today. No, you didn't. So
yeah, I'm sorry. That was on me. I was trying.
No, not on you.
Literally just got out of an airport, which I'll talk about on Monday. But I asked Dr. Carr if we could start a little late so I can get here. But yeah, and I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you too. And let me just take this moment not only to thank you, because again, to jump off a plane, especially in these days, and come straight to starting, that's no small task. And I know that rhythm, but also to underscore that, our times have changed over the years, and sometimes Saturdays are impossible for one of us, usually me, which means we've had to, go live on Mondays, not Mondays, on Fridays sometimes, or hella early, as we did a couple of weeks ago when I was in Montgomery. We had to go early, and you've never done anything other than say, let's make it happen. In the early days, we didn't go live at all, and going live was a treat. And so we built this road by walking it. And so, yeah, for everybody who is normally with us at 7:30 at Eastern time here on the East Coast of the United States of America and the criminal enterprise known as United States of America, you got to sleep in a little bit if you're in Nubia because you knew because everybody posted that. It was posted in Nubia that we start at 10:30. For everybody else, you didn't miss. So if you've been up early and thought, we didn't break the stream. We serious about that. So, tell everybody to come on in and jump in. If you're in the barbershops, if you are in the retirement homes, if you're used to doing this on your daily walk, if you're used to doing this in other places and you didn't miss, tell all the people who are in these spaces. And I named those couple of spaces there importantly because, as I said a couple of years ago when I was in Nashville, I walked into the barbershop and they said, we have y'all on in the morning. That's before we started going at 7:30. That's we were a little bit later in the morning. And there were times when we started at noon, and then there are most people who come into the conversation, come in after we have had the conversation we're having now. So for some people coming in who catch our conversation after we've had it in real time, you having the joy of being in conversation with everybody. And I'm looking in both chats, both in Bongies. And no kings is today. Thank you, Brother Nelson, for raising that. I'm looking in the Mbongi in Nubia, and here in the YouTube side, somebody asked me about this jersey I have on. Shout out to the Mzizi, the folks at Mzizi. That's M-I-Z-I-Z-I shop, the Zizi shop. These are Africans who have put together some beautiful baseball jerseys and hockey jerseys. They got Ghana, they got Haiti, they got Nigeria finally dropped. They got the Pan-African joints. They got the Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. I'm all about the Black-owned businesses. So when I saw somebody with one on, maybe early last year, I'm like, hey, where you get that? They told me where. And I said, let me get a couple of those. So I just happen to have this, of course, back in the closet, and I said, on this occasion, you should rock the Ghana. I ain't never wore this. I just had it, but when it got warm, and so yeah, I'm rocking it in. I had the Haiti joint. I've worn the Haiti, particularly in solidarity with the Haitians. We had a guy on this week, Mr. Johnson, who works at a think tank here in D.C. to update us on what's going on in Haiti as they're getting ready to put this gang task force out in the street, another concoction of the West, trying to jam our people in Haiti up. So I believe in wearing solidarity as well. And that is partially an answer to what you raised, Pra. How do we break through? In our Africana Studies conceptual category framework, which is the anchor that anchors our work here, that anchors that work of jailbreaking the Black University as we pass our sixth year of doing this and enter our seventh calendrical cycle, hence the part of the reason why we're calling this week 6-7. We'll get to that in a minute. We know that our Africana Studies conceptual category framework, social structure, governance, ways of knowing, science and technology, cultural meaning making and movement and memory, the sixth there's another six, but this six actually means something. The fourth of our categories, science and technology, provide us a window into trying to grapple with the answer to the question you raised. How do we break through? How do we break through the noise? In the science and technology that we live in now, the question we raised in our Africana Studies framework is, how do African people, how have we used, how have we created, how have we adapted technology, how have we come up with ways of thinking about interacting with the material world, the material reality, the science, to move through time and space during our time and space? Well, we're in a moment in terms of science and technology where there's a continuing fracture of points of sharing opinion, sharing mass opinion, sharing information. It means more and more points of entry. Everybody's got a microphone, everybody's got a platform, not everybody, but so many people that it feels like everybody. So that when we started 6 years ago, just a little over 6 years ago, we're at the end of March 2026. It was late February, early March 2020 when we started this weekly conversation with a conversation on Ida B. Wells. And then the second conversation we had, for those of you who have been with us since the beginning, and you can see all of our conversations they're archived in Nubia, and you can see many of them, most of them, either on the Karen Hunter platform or your platform, Prof, on YouTube, or coming to the Narrative platform. You can see many of them here. The second of our 316th conversations, this being the 316th, but God so loved the world, the 316th conversation that we've had. The second of those 316 consecutive weekly conversations was, why studying our history is so important. And for 316 consecutive weeks, we've had those conversations, which began as 20-minute conversations, 22-minute conversations in terms of the third conversation, because that was the first week of May when the Pulitzer Committee had announced that it had awarded the 1619 Project, the New York Times 1619 Project, a Pulitzer Prize collectively, and another an award separately for the lead essay in the project by my colleague Nicole Hannah-Jones. Well, we talked about that. And so what we have done over the arc of these 316 weeks, these 6 years going into our 7th cycle, is try to answer the question that you raised. Even as we did that in the dead of a global pandemic, which meant from those 20-minute conversations, those 20-plus-minute conversations, they turned into hour-long conversations, 2 hours, sometimes 3 or 4 hours in the dead of COVID. And I shouldn't have said it in that way. I mean, certainly no pun intended, literally no pun intended, but as people were suffering and struggling, this became a lifeline. And so when we see the kindred family soul coming in and being in conversation with us, Philip Bailey from Earth, Wind, and Fire, you name it, people are all in here having this conversation. And some folks, and that's why I mentioned nursing homes in particular and assisted living facilities, because there are elders who are now ancestors for whom one of the last things they heard on this planet were our voices, and as their family members have said to us over the arc of these years, we gave them great comfort, we gave them great hope, and we gave them great determination to pass on into the ancestral realm, knowing that their work had not only been in vain, but that it would continue in our bloodline, in our labor. That is an awesome responsibility. And I don't take, and you don't take, Prof, we don't take this responsibility lightly in answering the question of how do we help? Because yes, ma'am, but go ahead, jump on in.
I was just co-signing. That's right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we know that you do this 5 days a week on the radio and on Saturdays, and then on Sundays convening reading groups and bringing people together. This is as the good brothers in Gangstar would say, this is a daily operation. As Dr. Obenga would say when he would call me at 2:00 in the morning with edits to something he had dictated to me earlier in the day that I was typing on my laptop back in Temple University in 1993 and 1994 and 1995, as he's working on a book that he's dictating to me out of his mouth. And he called me at 2:00 in the morning. I said, Dr. Obenga, you still up? He said, you still up? I said, yeah. And he told me, Greg, it's our life. It's our life. This is what we do. What else you going to do with your life? What else are you going to do with your life? And so we take that very seriously. So week after week, we pour these clean glasses of water. And after a year of it, because you had determined that we really require another place where we can kind of have this conversation, but have it in a way that also institution builds in a material sense, the appearance of narrative and Nubia. And then continuing in that work, you said, let's expand, connect, network out even more places. So you bring much of this conversation, which you had already been doing, into the Sirius XM space, all while maintaining accessibility given finally to the science and technology that we find ourselves into a space like YouTube and then to podcasts and everywhere else, so that everybody's talking at the same time. But even as everybody is talking at the same time, and all these platforms have mushroomed, so that in the middle of COVID, when we had tens and 20s and hundreds of thousands for a couple of those conversations that we had, people tuned in real time. We understand the value of this place is not quantitatively in terms of numbers, but in terms of consistent demonstration of a standard that we refuse to lower because it would reach more people. The easiest thing in the world would be to come in with the hot takes, to come in with the controversial, unnuanced conversations, to come in and say something inflammatory. If anybody thinks that that's hard, then you're not paying attention to what's going on. I watched part of a conversation the other day with the good brother Shannon Sharp, Club Shay Shay, which of course, everybody wants to talk about Cat Williams. Fine, that's no problem. And he had on his couch someone who was talking about the electric vehicles in China. We all know BYD, but then the other ones. And Shannon Sharp was sitting there, good brother, and he was like, yeah, that ain't never going to happen in the United States. They ain't never going to let them cars come in the United States. I've never even seen one. Hey, man, I ain't mad at you, brother. First of all, you're wrong. Second of all, The reason that, second of all, the reason that you're wrong is because the market is going to break the back of the United States of America. It's not going to happen today or tomorrow or next year, but it will happen eventually. It will happen eventually. Because the thing you don't understand about capitalism, capitalists don't believe in flags, whether it be Ghana or the United States or Brazil or England or Germany. Capitalists don't believe in flags. The Chinese have already entered and are crushing slowly or very quickly, actually, the European market. Soon you will be able to buy a BYD, my friend, because the capitalists don't give a damn about you, about me, about any of. But in your lack of awareness of that, that's not an indictment of Shannon Sharp. He played football. That's why we know him. And he's smart enough to have translated this, as has the former quarterback of the Carolina Panthers, has figured out how to translate that into being in front of our faces all the time. But if you think for a minute that them talking like we're talking now would attract those kind of eyeballs, then you don't know. This is the chaos, but we're not here for the quantitative. As you say often, Prop, the fact that, and it's interesting when you're thinking about this in this context, the numbers of people who come in weekly here, and we can count on usually around at a floor of 20,000, sometimes multiples of that even now. That is not just the people who are coming in and coming in once or twice or 3 or 4 times. That's the people who they touch. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not in a space, that you're not in a space, and I'm out here in these streets a lot, where I don't run into people in every walk of life. The cat driving the bus and the people riding the bus and the people who are running the institutions that I get off the bus to walk into to be in conversation. I don't care whether it's CEO of corporations or somebody who is unhoused, who is selling copies of the local paper that the unhoused produce here, Street Sense. And they say, hey, man, y'all keep this up. You tell Prof. Hunter. And now let me tell you right now, that is a deeper, more indelible, and ultimately more liberatory reach than anything out there that is consistently talking. And I'm talking about even the talking heads who still haven't figured out that race is not the center of what we need to be talking about, even as it's important. We'll come to that. So how do we reach? We keep going. Not quantitatively, but in the terms of the consistent demonstration of the standard, and in a way that is accessible. That would be the last thing I say about that. Meaning that over the arc of our time, and as for the intent of how I look at it in terms of what we're doing, and what I mean very concretely and specifically about, quote, jailbreaking the university, I'm going to take a moment here and pull out here of the internet, since I'm sitting in front of a computer, the place where you can go to read the very concrete way that I look at what we're doing. And I will put it in the Mbongis. This is an article that I wrote last year before last, called Introduction to Africana Studies Toward a Freedom Course Design. And it kind of traces what we have done. I've done this before, but I just put it in the YouTube, and I'll put it in the Nubians have it. Everybody in Nubian Nation has it. And somebody drop it in there as well. I'll drop it in there as well in a minute. You have this. This is an article that I wrote that actually chronicles how this kind of emerged, how COVID hit. And at first I thought, okay, the HBCUs, it's time to jailbreak the Black university. So we started with Sankofa. Shout out to Haile and Shriek Garima and all the crew at Sankofa. We started on YouTube, and then Prof, you said, can I press record? And the rest is history. We went from there to YouTube, and then a platform, Nubia and Narrative, and the rest we have been building and continuing to build. And what I do in this article is walk through the concept. Now, in the space we have here in class, we do a little bit of current events, whether it be from newspapers, magazines, websites, journals, ephemera. We intersperse that with a question on literacy that we answer through suggesting books and other readings and study recommendations and demonstrations of how to go through reading. You know, reading is hard for people who can't read, but for people who can, but who are illiterate, not illiterate, illiterate, in other words, can read and choose not to, you know, we introduce, here's some books, here's some articles, here's some thinking, and here's how perhaps to model how to go through some of it. Because I am all the toes on the planet down about this. I believe one of my deep principles as the first person in my immediate family, go to college, and as someone who will never leave that grounding. We had a long conversation, about an hour, with the good brother, my friend now, Maurice Eddington, who was the president of the University of the District of Columbia, himself first generation student out of Berkeley, California, Berkeley High School, who came all the way across the country to go to Fisk University, got a PhD, scientist at Vanderbilt University for 25 years, was at the Florida A&M University as provost, eventually chief operating officer, who now is the president of the University of District of Columbia, the public HBCU here in the District of Columbia. And if you all are on Sirius, you'll hear that interview next week on Channel 126. We're talking Powers and Becomes Action. We had a long conversation with him, and I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. But I'm 10 toes down with Maurice Eddington. I'm 10 toes down with President Eddington on this subject. Everybody can learn. That's why he took the job at the nation's public HBCU. Because understand, when you take the job at the University of the District of Columbia, you're at the heart of empire. And what you do there, they got a community college. He said you can start with a certificate program and stay here and go all the way through a law degree or a doctorate. You could do all that work in a place where you are invited in. And people say, well, I don't have this test score. Hey, man, are you breathing? Yeah, come here. Let's go. I'm 10 toes down on that. So for people who go out here and try to mystify, either because they think it's necessary or because they are in there some kind of insecurity thinking they got to show that they can manage all this language to demonstrate they're smart to people who that still won't be enough for them to be human in the eyes of those people you're trying to plead to, who think that somehow you can mystify academic language and make it seem like more than it is. I'm all the toes on the planet down to demystify that, to destroy it. That's what jailbreak means to me. We're all capable of thinking and understanding, and it's going to take all of us to do that. So we do that piece of what's going on now. We'll talk about that a little bit later, certainly because there's a birthright citizenship case that's going to be argued before the Supreme Court on Wednesday. That might be the most important case to be argued before the Supreme Court in quite some time here in the United States. We do that literacy piece. We introduce, here's some books, here's some articles, whether you ever read them or not. What's been demystified is the idea that you couldn't do it if you didn't want to. And part of it is me saying, here's the stuff that I think you don't need to spend no time on. We're going to talk about a couple of those books today. We do the intellectual CSIs, I call it, the crime scenes investigation. That's why when we leave here, whether it be all of us, Prof, together as you had us in Galveston last year on Juneteenth, or whether it be me going to Montgomery every time I'm down there, or going to Philly, or going to Nashville, or going wherever I am, with Dayton, Ohio, with Olabisi and Larry down there at Martin Delaney's place, or the Paul Robeson house, wherever you find, wherever I go, we're not going to miss a Saturday. And so we're going to have that conversation, and we're going to have it together. We're going to do that, whether it be the genealogy, what you in the early years called the you should know. Here are some people that we should think about. We should always keep in mind. Here are some events that we should always keep in mind. You should know those elements from the beginning. It's always commingled in this. In fact, we will mention it because today is the 58th anniversary of the sanitation strike that Martin King helped lead the march of. The 28th of March, for those of you watching it another day, it was the 28th of March, Saturday now, today is the 28th of March, where Dr. King found himself in Memphis, a detour in his organizing of the Poor People campaign that literally changed the governance formation of what we call in social structure renderings, the civil rights movement. Had King lived, it'd be a different movement. But he did not live on top of the earth. He became an ancestor, and so Jesse Lewis Jackson, among others, emerges. Would the same trajectory have taken place? No, it wouldn't have, because King is different than Jackson. If people say we don't need leaders, what we need is movements, please understand that avatars have been with us since the beginning of humanity. And that those avatars become very important when their attitudes reflect the attitudes of masses of people, but their outsized individual talents allow them to channel those attitudes toward an effective intervention in oppressive situations. Martin King is very important because he is Martin King. And he's very important because of his partner, Coretta Scott King out of Marion, Alabama. Shout out to my man, Andrew Billingsley, who on Saturday after I left here, we went down to the 100th birthday celebration of Dr. Billingsley, a man who was born not too far from where Coretta Scott was born, there in Alabama, in Marion, Alabama. This is the man right here, Andrew Billingsley. This was at Hampton University Student Center. And I can say that I am so thrilled because I hadn't been to Hampton in years. I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't been to the campus of Hampton University. I don't have a I don't have a dog in the fight of the real HU, by the way, y'all know that. But I hadn't been to Hampton in 40 years. Last time I was at Hampton, I was an undergraduate at Tennessee State, and I was acting and I was in the forensics team. I was doing one act plays and all that kind of stuff. And we had the annual convening of the National Speech and Dramatic Arts Group, NADSA, which is the Black drama, HBC drama programs at historically Black colleges. And we had our final competitions on the campus of Hampton, the home by the sea. And Hampton is a beautiful campus. It was beautiful then, but they have built so much in the last 40 years, and I wish I could have spent more time. I'm going back down there soon just to spend some time around the campus. And it happened to be Accepted Students Day. So the campus was just full of parents and students. And we're trying to get to the reception before the luncheon for Dr. Billingsley. This man right here, this is my hero right here. In fact, I had him sign his last book. Well, he's got a book coming up. He's writing about his father. His nephews are helping him. 100 years old man, he never stops working. And y'all go through the compendium, you'll see us talking about Andy Billingsley. Shout out to him. Shout out to his partner, Mama Amy Billingsley. Shout out to all of the people, his daughter, his son-in-law, all the people, his nieces, nephews, all of his grand nieces who did a poetic rendering. It was very important, a very important moment. But, thinking about him in that context and thinking about, trying to get to the celebration, which was in the Hampton Student Center, I had to stop like 4 times because there were parents and there was children, the students who had been accepted who are touring the grounds. And so all of the greetings that I mentioned a minute ago that I'm supposed to come back and convey to you, Professor Hunter, also come from the parents of the students who are coming to Hampton in the fall. I'll tell her next week, I promise you. So to those students, all you parents who stopped me, who's taking pictures and be like, you gonna be there Saturday, right? Yeah, I saw you this morning. I saw y'all before I came. Okay. I saw you in a hotel room before I came over here. Just know, yes. There's no number. You can't put no number on that. It might show up as one YouTube view, but that's a whole family and whoever else is in the conversation. So I wanted to mention that. But in that process then of this, creating this genealogy, you should know the final component is that component, which is the grounding component of every week, which is the community discussion, which we continue in Nubia in office hours, which is why office hours was created, a space for us to continue the conversation, but which is going on right now. So as I'm looking, yeah, absolutely. Please see, somebody said this. Thank you, Louisiana refugee in Nubia. Ooh, crime scene investigation. I'm willing to do that. He said, I'm willing to do that in the high school. I'm gonna put that in the high school. Yeah, please put it in your course because I'm writing on that right now. I call it intellectual CSI. And my colleague, who, of course, one of the most brilliant minds we produce, Angie Porter, Professor Angela Porter, it's already quoted me on that and writing it as she's developing Africana legal studies. And I'm not saying that for any proprietary sense. I'm saying that because as that concept kind of echoes out, one of the reasons that I write and have to write is because people will take that conversation and try to make it mean completely something else. No, this whole country is a crime scene. So anybody trying to use intellectual CSI for anything other than that, you have misused it. And don't worry, if I find out, I'll make you famous the following week. But at any rate, so to think about this week, I thought maybe we could use the term as we have just paid. We're in almost a liminal space, an indeterminate space, a between space. We started because of UPROV, the in-class conversations we've had late February, early March. We were in the middle of that pandemic, 2020. So we just are in the cycle where we're passing the 6th cycle of in-class. And we are now, at the same time, just entering the cycle, the 7th cycle. Yeah, so it's, 6, 7. But if you've read at all, or if you've listened at all, and I have the fortune of being around young people all the time, college-age students, high school-age students. That's where I've lived my entire life. I was either a teenager or in conversation with teenagers. So when I finished college, I was 22 years old, and maybe with the exception of that first year at Ohio State, when I was my first year of law school, when I was 23 years old, turned 23, that might be the only year, the only time, wasn't even a full year, when I wasn't actively involved in some form of education, teaching in a space where there were children involved or teenagers, young adults involved. So I spent my whole life in those spaces. So 6, 7 wasn't nothing. I saw it when it came. And I also understand that it, like everything else that comes out when you're that age and coming into adulthood. It was something that young people created, and I like the way that it was put. My former student, who now is a journalist, a wide-ranging journalist, Aisha Rasco, when she did a piece at National Public Radio late last year, on the quote-unquote real meaning of 6-7. And one of the young people said, it's like an inside joke with no inside. So don't try to figure out what it means. It don't mean nothing. In fact, the person told Aisha, said if you read too much into it, you're missing the point. One of the scholars who calls herself studying this says it's anti-sensical play. It's not a nonsense word. It's an anti-sensical word. So don't think nonsense. Think anti-sense. I mean it don't mean nothing. Well, was it LaMelo Ball 6'7"? Yeah, you thinking too much. It's 6'7". What's 6'7"? It's 6'7". You know what I'm saying? But here's the thing that'll blow our minds. Democracy is 6'7". Oh, we're going to get into that. So I figured it's not just the move from the 6th year to the 7th year, 6th cycle to the 7th cycle. It's really, that's giving it more meaning than anything that was intended. And that means that the way I'm using it today is just as valid as the way anybody else uses it, which speaks to the indeterminacy of this space we're in. Another reason in class is so important is to disabuse us of the notion that any of these things that have been said that are anti-African or anti-human have any force. That's why John Muhammad doing what he did. That ain't gonna mean nothing. You tell me something that does mean something. Your bozo friend and told y'all that he could bomb everybody out of existence today, and he could open the Strait of Hormuz. As you are listening to this in your car and getting ready to go to the gas station, you tell me 6'7". Come on, you tell me he could do. This past Thursday, there was an article in the New York Times by Lydia Palgreen, longtime journalist for the New York Times. And every time I read Lydia Palgreen, I think about Randall Robinson roasting Lydia Palgreen over Palgreen's writing about Haiti 20 years ago. He writes about Palgreen's columns in his book, no, actually longer than that, quarter century ago, his book, The Debt, an excellent book on reparations. In fact, still for me, the go-to book on reparations for that era and really for a lot after it. That's the first book I ever picked. You remember this, Sister Dr. Kelly Mickens, back in the day when we picked the first book for Philadelphia Freedom Schools for all of our high school students to read, and invited Randall Robinson to Philly. And he came and spent that time with us and left so touched by the fact that you had a couple hundred high school students reading his book line by line, and came and peppered him with questions he hadn't even thought about, that now ancestor wrote about us in his second book, the second book of that. There were 3 books he wrote in that trilogy, The Debt. And then the second book he wrote, The Reckoning, What Blacks Owe to Each Other, which in ways kind of helped populate what I was thinking of through the lens of Jacob Carruthers as the governance formation category. The Debt, what the book on reparations Randall Robinson wrote was called The Debt, What America Owes Blacks. That's a social structure conversation. Then he wrote The Reckoning, What Blacks Owe to Each Other. I said, for me, that's governance. That's who we do. And then the third was his brilliant book that he wrote about going to his wife Hazel's home country in the Caribbean, called Quitting America. Randall Robinson was always clear. But in the first of those 3 books, he talks about this idea where he's very critical of Lydia Palgreen. Also in his book, An Unbroken Agony, there were a couple of people who we picked more than one of their books for Freedom School students to read over the years. And we read another of Randall Robinson's book, and he came back to Philadelphia. Actually, he came to University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Memory serves me correctly, in Jamele and all the folks who were there to have conversations with us about Haiti. It was called An Unbroken Agony, and he's very critical of Lydia Palgreen. But Palgreen wrote an article this past week in the New York Times, where Palgreen observes that America does not know how to exist in a world it does not control. That is absolutely true, and it's been true from the beginning of this criminal enterprise. And I thought about it because between seizing temporary control of state and federal governments, which is what the white nationalists have done here to too many states in this United States of America, at least almost half of them, 24, 26, that President Mahama mentioned in a conversation he had in Philadelphia at the Human Rights Council when asked about the anti-LGBTQ legislation that's currently being advanced as a private bill in the Ghana legislature. when asked about his perspective on that, he said, listen, we're going to let the legislative process do what it does. We're going to let it move through. And if it makes it to my desk as president, I have the option of vetoing it or sending it back to Parliament for changes. I also have the option of consulting, with the legal authorities to see if this is constitutional. Now, what he didn't say in response to this question was whether or not he would support it, because he has said in previous years if that bill were to reach his desk, he would sign it. And it has some terrible things in it. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Now, the previous president, Ado, didn't sign it. He said, in fact, that it would violate the Ghanaian constitution, and Ghana would not go backward in terms of any of these things that might impose some kind of penalty on you if you're queer in Ghana. But Ado didn't sign the bill before he got out of the presidency. He said that he was against it, but he didn't sign it. And so it lapsed, and that they're bringing it back. But I'm bringing that up because in answering the question, what President Muhammad did say was, half the states in the United States of America got anti-queer legislation, anti-queer LGBTQ laws and policies. And so I'm saying that because this Paul Green article where she says that America does not know how to exist in a world it does not control, really vacillating between seizing temporary control of state and federal government, which these anti-human, anti-common humanity, anti-LGBTQIA, anti-Black, everybody, anti-Latino, these white nationalists, they've seized temporary control of about half the states. And right now, they have temporary capture of the federal government. We saw what the MAGA Muppet did. Those of you who are working in TSA, who are looking at Bozo, because Bozo said he's going to give an executive order to the wrestling Mark Wayne Mullen, the head now of Homeland Security in the United States of America, to pay you. Please understand it's probably unconstitutional and illegal, although there may be some budgetary maneuvering, because I see the nasty piece of work Russell Vought's fingerprints all over this. They're trying to get another power grab at the expense of the people who haven't been paid that you just saw, Prof, in the airports. Understand that all of that is because the white nationalists have temporarily captured the federal government and are trying to cement just a few more breaths before their white nationalist project collapses in on them and their white nationalist lungs, political lungs, collapse. And it is our duty to speed that moment. But through moving between those temporary controls of state and local government, white nationalist politicians in the United States are fighting desperately to impose their narrow ideology on the country's fragile, stitched together white nationalist project that's part of a larger stitched together white nationalist project that this genocide-based, European settler colony-based country we call the United States of America, built on stolen African labor, sustained by a narrative of creation in this 250th year, the semi-quincentennial year, half of 500 years, and they ain't gonna make it another 250. But this narrative, this narrow narrative that projects inevitability and dominance, that Paul Green wrote this week and says America doesn't know how to exist in a world it does not control. Well, here's a bulletin for you, white nationalists. You've never controlled it. Every time you tell us George Washington, the father of our country, every time you tell us America, greatest country in the world, every time you tell us we can impose our will on anyone else, you know what it is? 6-7. But you rely on us leaning into this 6-7 explanation of who you are. For us believing in that, you believe in things you don't understand, you suffer. You rely on us doing that for you to continue this mythology, the illusion that this contemporary social structure we live in, the illusion that you seek to impose afresh at this semi-quincentennial is that the United States is somehow founded as anything other than part of Europe's global rise. And that the rest of us are a terrible inconvenience that you couldn't kill, that you couldn't stamp out. But what you're beginning to realize as this country in the United States population continues to move toward reflecting the world's overwhelming non-white majority, this illusion is unraveling as excesses of nativism in the US and other places, Eurocentrism always, and racial capitalism. As these things are producing global fracture, desperate attempts to prop it up don't matter, and to seize control of the old system. Because you got people who are not white, who are trying to figure out how to prop up the system so they can take charge of it. Muhammad bin Salman, son of Salman, MBS, baby. The world now, even in the commercial news entertainment press, the world is reporting. MBS, that you and your friends whispering into Bozo's ears. You ain't even whispering no more. You already gave $2 billion to my man in the dead man suit, Jared Kushner's son-in-law, who's out there with the crypto king, Steve Witkoff, trying to profit off of this disaster stuff, the Trump crime family and his friends. But MBS, everybody know you paid Kushner at the end of the last Trump presidency. $2 billion you put in his sovereign wealth fund, setting it up for possibly now. And you calling Trump every day, telling him to bomb the ish out of Iran so that you maybe can get control over this criminal enterprise system. Everybody sees it. They even reporting it in the commercial news entertainment media. But here's the problem you have, MBS, and anybody else who aspires to that crown. That crown got all the jewels and gone. That crown is going to be worth as much as that Burger King crown shortly. Oh, I'm sorry. Y'all read the news a couple of weeks ago. They said they retired the Burger King mascot. He was creepy anyway, but they kept the crown. Guess what? That cardboard crown they give out at Burger King, that's going to be about worth what this world system is going to be worth shortly. So MBS, if you fighting for that, bruh, you got a problem. Plus, read in yesterday's paper that the clean energy billionaires, them boys who live in Texas and got a home in Angola and everywhere else, now they coming after the white nationalists who have been messing this thing up, who through their white nativism have been saying they want to go and dig some coal and get all the oil. And no, because these are clean energy billionaires. There was a front page article in the New York Times this week about how they going in Texas after Chip Roy. Y'all know Chip Roy, that white nationalist. He was one of the ones in the main, in front of the microphone over the past couple of days as the MAGA Muppet blocked paying the TSA workers. And here's Chip Roy running up there. But the clean energy billionaires in Texas have spent $600 million, and they're going to spend another $500,000 trying to get him out of his seat in Texas, not over his racial ideology, but because he's one of the main people blocking the conversion to clean energy. But guess who else is now blocking the conversion to oil? Conversion. Guess who else is blocking maintaining oil as the go-to energy source? Let me think. Oh yeah, Iran. You know how many people are looking at these white nationalists like, man, we need to go clean energy. Them people who are getting their shipments, a fifth of the world's oil from the Strait of Hormuz. But against all this backdrop, against this, these desperate attempts to prop up this current system or to seize control of the old system, guess what's emerging? Demands for renegotiation by those who have suffered the most under it. And as we read Howard's book, Born in Blackness, and as you say, Prof, talking about the second emancipation, the Nkrumah book, it's a good moment. We mentioned this last week in office hours, so we might as well say it here. We're going to advance, and then part 2 of our conversation, which will bring us up to the living now, we're going to go right into the second emancipation and just put the set together after we finish Born in Blackness, which we will do over the next couple of weeks. For those of you who are continuing with us, if you have a subscription to Narrative and have not yet activated Nubia, or if you're in Nubia and not yet have come in on Monday nights, you know, we got over a couple of thousand people every week going through this book page by page. So you can get in next week. We're going to start in the 5th part of the book. And that's the last part of the book where he brings it up to where we are now. And then we'll take a moment to breathe, to think about that. And we'll talk about what happened at the UN this week in our conversation this week in office hours. And then we're going to go into the second emancipation. But against this backdrop, that 19th annual UN International Day for Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade became a site of growing demands for reckoning. The system is weakening now. Ralph Bunche writing about it in the early 19th century. Here we are, before World War I broke out. Oh, actually, right around the time World War broke out and after, because Bunche was all about that anti-colonialism, that decolonial moment. And now World War II, you see the countries break loose in the Caribbean, in Latin America, in Africa, other places, Asia. And what you see is they try to maintain control at that point. And what do? They exert military control. They depose governments. They undermine people, whether it be Mossadegh in Iran, which starts this mess with the Shah being replaced, or whether it be Salvador Allende in Chile, or whether it be all those governments. And of course, the one that continues to persist, much to the chagrin of the white nationalists of the United States of America and the Spanish-speaking white nationalists who joined them. Shout out to little Marco, the Italian, Spanish, not Cuban. At least that's what you said, ain't it, little Marco, as you came out as a white man in Europe, in Munich a couple of weeks ago. Much to their chagrin, Cuba persists. Much to their chagrin, Russia may be helping them with oil shipments. Much to their chagrin, Mexico, who is now Mexican Navy looking for a couple of boats that were headed toward Cuba because looks like maybe Pistol Pete, as Gerald Horn calls him, or the Runt Rooster, as I call him, Pete Hegseth, maybe they blew them up in the Gulf of Mexico. But the point is that they persist. It's a problem. You can't kill every head of state. And in the case of Iran, you keep decapitating them and they grow another head that's younger and more angry at you than the one they cut off. So let's be clear. This moment of renegotiation against all this backdrop, when Muhammad shows up on that podium this week from Ghana, representing Africa, not just Africa, but as we just heard him say, every African in the world. So all you blackface nativists, I got something for you. Coming to you in a minute. This resolution on behalf of Africans globally, declaring the trafficking of Africans the greatest crime against humanity in history, and demanding repair, is a problem. It was passed overwhelmingly by the member states, rejected in both telling dissent and abstention from the old global power states and those held hostage by them. That vote exposed both the hopes and the fears in the current world social structure and raises urgent questions about responsibility, about memory, and about repair. So we're in this seventh cycle now, having come out of the sixth cycle. And we enter this cycle thinking about this question of 6-7 as a moment of transition, as a moment of ambiguity, as a moment where we have to engage in an act of collective meaning making. That sixth and final category in our conceptual categories, movement and memory. How do we pass on from generation to generation to generation the information that we have learned and narratives that fortify us, that bring us together? We're in a moment which this Africana Studies framework is essentially important to Africans and other people because it centers our voices, it centers our intellectual traditions, and it addresses both the origins of white supremacy and the questions of what we must be done now. Because let's not mistake it. Pursuing this as an anti-racist project, with all due respect to my friend and our colleague at Howard, Ibram Kendi, who's just written a book. I'm looking at it right now. I'm not telling you to go buy it. I'm reading it so you don't have to. Chain of Ideas. You know what I did? I went through all the footnotes, including the ones online, which are as long as the ones in the book. And I went back through and read the whole table of contents, then went back through and read the first few pages of each chapter. And now I'm going through and reading the whole thing. Africa's not in there. It's not about Africa. Africans are not in there except as victims of white supremacy. And it's a compendium of anti-racist stuff around the globe. But that ain't what we do here. We talk about those things in the first category, social structure, because they're necessary. This is the world we live in, but it is not the world that we inhabit from our foundation. This is a governance conversation. So what we do here in class contends, asserts, observes that we must be generative, not reactive. We're not, being anti-racist is a natural conclusion of being who you are, being self-determining. And so we call for deeper engagement. We're modeling deep engagement with the questions of repair. What Muhammad did was a demonstration of repair, not just a demand for repair. The demand for repair is addressing the social structure. The declaration of solidarity, of family, of community is a question of internal repair. That's a governance conversation. And it's community grounded. Now, we're going to talk about it because it's not uncritical. And I got some words for Lincoln University in a minute here. The other thing that we have in class is a living archive. It is a living archive. Every week we contribute to it. We're looking at moments in our journey as human beings that are occurring while they're happening. Without oversimplifying them into these narrow racial explanations, we're grounded into self-determination, into culture. And so the insight, any insight we might get, any depth we might achieve come from this Africana Studies approach rather than allowing events and ideas to just not only be unexplored and ununderstood, but to approach us, to keep hitting us like 6-7, 6-7, 6-7. Each week gives us another chance to reflect, to learn, to recommit to building a more just and sustainable future through serious study and collective effort. So let's think about this. And shout out to our sister, who is, of course, the reason we're even in this conversation, Prof, who introduced us now these years ago. These are all closer to 7 now. We're getting close to 7 years ago, Ajwa Batwe Asmoa, who was sitting at Temple University and at the Human Rights Council when President Muhammad, because, she couldn't let him come this far and not go see the homie. She know all them people. Ajwa's Rolodex is insane. And she was sitting there when this white woman asked President Muhammad, can you talk to us about your thoughts about this anti-LGBTQ bill and how it balances with your dedication to democracy. And what Muhammad said was, naturally, those democratic processes are working. He said, Ghana cannot be distracted by some things. He said, that's not the most important issue for Ghanaians. And that could have set off alarm bells. But then he goes on to say, he's telling her this, and I'm reading verbatim. He says, the most important issues are good health care, housing, providing for clean water for our people. He said, still more than 35% of our people don't have access just to water. He said, so those types of things are naturally at the center of what we're doing. But sometimes these other things bubble up and we need to deal with them. Then he said, let me point out that the issue of LGBTQ rights are emotive. It was very interesting when he said that. And we're not completely settled in terms of their nuances and arguments, not only in Ghana, but all over the world. That's when he said there are 26 states in the United States that still restrict LGBTQ rights. He said, and so in a country in Ghana, like Ghana, and all over the world, he said, the process in Ghana is playing out in terms of what those rights are. He said, it's not a government-sponsored bill. It's a privately sponsored bill. He said, we have invited everyone into the process, NGOs, groups, everybody to discuss. He said, if it passes and comes to the president, this is a direct quote, if there are issues, I can send it back to Parliament. He said, I can send it to the Council of State for advice. He says, there are many issues still playing out. He says, public policy, our legal traditions. I thought about J.B. Danquah, and I thought about J.E. Casely Hayford, and I'm thinking, what is he saying and not saying? Then he said cultural contexts and our social consensus. I'm saying you just said a whole lot with them three things. Our legal traditions. You're talking about the British, the English, the European legal tradition, the customary law traditions, as J.B. Danquah writes about Fonte, for example, customary law. He said our cultural context. Now, they're going to tell you right there. When he said emotive, I am a firm believer that every human has the right to exist in their own humanity. And I know a lot of people who would say, as a heterosexual man or as a heterosexual woman, I support LGBTQ rights. I could easily say that because it would be in a social structure rendering true. But in a governance formation, which deals with Africana ways of knowing, my Africana question is, why I got to say homosexual or heterosexual? Why do I have to do that? Because I know too much. I know too many people. I've been in too many sets of circumstances where gender would be imposed in a situation in a social structure rendering, where culturally in an Africana rendering, I'm not talking about an Africana rendering which is trying to squeeze itself into Western concepts of gender. No, I'm talking about an Africana rendering where the gender is not even a consideration. I've seen people mounted by Orisha, which would be called male in a gendered rendering, and the person who got mounted would be called female in a Western rendering. I said, but go read Randy Matori's book, Sex and the Empire That Is No More, about Oyo in Yoruba, and then about Brazil, or his books on Africana religion, or for that matter, anybody else grappling with this. So when John Muhammad says cultural traditions, I'm saying, who is he talking to? You talk about them Negroes who are more white Jesus than the white people who are Jesus. When you go to Accra and see white Jesus up on the damn walls like he Jay-Z or somebody, or the Mormons, who is he talking about? Because I know what it is to be in church all day. But I also know what it is when the Africans in church all day. You ain't got to leave Bishop Mike Kelsey's church here in Trinidad in D.C. to be in church all day. Shout out, happy birthday, brother, by the way, 70th birthday. I seen what that was up close. We was in there. But I'm just saying, I could be in church all day. I've been in church all day in South Africa, singing right along, and I didn't know what a word was in Kosa, Jack, but I was right in there singing. I'm saying, is that what you're talking about? Because some very same people might condemn there in South Africa or in Accra, Ghana, or the South Side Chicago or LA, or condemn homosexuality as against the will of God. But you reading that book that they put on you. And you know damn well your sister is queer. So when John Muhammad says emotive, I'm saying, what is he saying and not saying? And he has also said, he made a statement like this early on in his presidency. He said, quote, if you want the position of my government, marriage is between a man and woman. He says a person's gender is determined at birth, and then also that the family is the foundation of our nation. He said that's our position. And so there are no questions or equivocations about what we believe. He said that. Now, he didn't say that in front of that white woman. And I don't know if his position has changed. And he is the president. And I'm wondering if that bill makes it through the parliament, which isn't a government bill, as he said, a private bill, whether he'll sign it or not, or whether the context of his responsibilities as head of the state, because I've read the Ghana Constitution, the 1992 Constitution, and that would fly in the face of human rights. So I don't know what he will do. It'll be interesting to see. But here's where I have a problem as someone who supports all human rights. Here's where I have a problem. This breaks my heart. And I know it breaks Ajua's heart. It breaks all of our hearts. That conversation should not have been had at that human rights convening. It should have been had on campus of Lincoln University. This week, Lincoln University rescinded the invitation to John Mahama, the president of Ghana, to come to Lincoln University, receive an honorary doctorate, and tour the campus, including the archive where Kwame Nkrumah's photographed as a first-year student at Lincoln, where his records are, where he writes about the campus that he wrote about in his autobiography, Ghana. It was rescinded. And there wasn't an explanation given by Lincoln, by the president of Lincoln, Dr. Brenda Allen. It wasn't an explanation given. And in that silence, everything flooded in. I read an article in the, I think it was the Philadelphia Gay News. It said it was because concerns about Muhammad's position on the LGBTQIA plus legislation were raised. I'm sure they were. And as an African, I'm telling you that if any question was raised about that, and it should have been raised, it should have been raised on the campus of Lincoln University, because this is what John Mahama said. This is what John Mahama said after leaving the UN at a historic moment for African people. This is what John Mahama said on the campus of Temple University, where he still spoke behind a podium with the T on it. Made me sick to my stomach. I got 2 degrees from Temple University. No, that's not true. 1 degree, the PhD. I didn't even stop for the master's. I could have picked up the master's on the way, but I already had a master's from Ohio State and African States, and they didn't need to forget me too. So I got a degree from Temple University, a terminal degree for whatever the hell that means. Respect to all the people I apprenticed under, including, of course, my dissertation advisor, the great Theophilo Benga, my dissertation committee chair, the great Nate Norman, Jacob Carruthers, Marimba Ani, who signed off on my dissertation as members of my committee, along with Ella Forbes, and Malefi Asante, of course, who wrote that program, who still walks the earth. Most of the people I just named still walk the earth. In fact, all of them except Jacob Carruthers. So shout out to all of them. I owe you eternally. But there shouldn't have been, Muhammad shouldn't have said what I'm about to quote to y'all, a direct quote from Muhammad. He shouldn't have said it behind a podium with a T on it. He should have said it with a podium with an L on it for Lincoln University. John Muhammad said the following. He said, whatever disagreements have come up, this is a direct quote, whatever disagreements have come up, Lincoln University holds a special place in my heart, because those are hallowed grounds for Ghana. It's part of our history. President Muhammad said, we cannot divorce Lincoln University from the history of Ghana. He said, that is where our first president, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, was nurtured with his intellectual capacity and his Pan-Africanist spirit. And it was from there that he took that spark and led the liberation struggle. President Muhammad said, not only in Ghana, but across the African continent, he said, and so the grounds of Lincoln are hallowed grounds for Ghanaians, and we will continue to hold that institution in high esteem. Now, John Muhammad has the kind of face that if you're an African person or someone who's a student of faces, you know, could be 6'7" in this regard. You know, and black people that got that face that look like they always in a slight moment of discomfort, but then when they smile, the eyes that narrow, it could be smiling eyes too. He looked like an old baby to me. You know, black people who are older and they look like babies. John Muhammad got that kind of face. So I'm looking at him saying those words I just repeated to y'all. Like I say, Audrey was sitting like 2 rows back because you know she a VIP, this Ghanaian girl from Connecticut and Ghana, mother, father. Pan-African is in her blood. Dr. Stephanie Tisdale was there. Thank you, Steph, for making sure that I saw what was going on. Steph took some beautiful footage, Dr. Tisdale. And if you haven't registered for the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations conference, it's our first in-person conference since COVID, although we've been doing it virtually all these years. It's going to be a hybrid conference, so you can still attend virtually. It's going to be here in Washington, D.C. at Roosevelt High School, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20th of April here at Roosevelt High School. Shout out to Dr. Courtney Wilkerson. As you would say, Doc, love your life. So Stephanie will be there. She's going to be presenting. But Steph sent me some footage. She was sitting there too. It was the temple. We all went to temple. That's where I met Aj. When she was 18 years old, and her father, her Ghanaian father, Kwame Batwe Asmoa, put her in my hand and said, you follow him. And now I'm following her because Aj is doing a thing. All the Deltas in the world were just here last week for Deltas on the Hill. So, she doing her thing. She was leading public advocacy and public service for them for a while, the national organization, the international organization. But Aj was sitting there, Steph was sitting there. And when the young people from Girard College came and they sang the national anthem of Ghana to the president, it warmed my heart and it broke my heart. It broke my heart that wasn't at Lincoln. And he got that face where as he was talking, I'm looking at this and he could have been either pained or just trying to play it straight, but he looked like he was in pain when he said what he said. If you want to, look, this is Africa. Look, one thing about African people, particularly young people. Anybody want to ask that question? And I would have been one to ask that question if I had been in a conversation with him, a public conversation about this legislation. You got to ask him about that, but it shouldn't be in a social structure situation. If it's going to happen, it needs to happen wherever it's going to happen. But you had a choice to make, Lincoln. And y'all took a L. You took a Pan-African L on that one, particularly when you got a Pan-African studies program there. My man Zizwe Poe put that together, particularly when that's where Kwame Nkrumah went to school. That's where Nnamdi Azikiwe went to school. That's where Horace Mann Bond was the president. This is where, come on now, everybody from Du Bois and the Africans, y'all go to Lincoln's archives sometime and check out what, to me, it was just like in a moment. So today, the 28th of March, 58 years ago, that sanitation strike, Dr. King in Memphis, he had deviated from his planning for the Poor People's March. We'll come back to this reparations in a minute. To return to Memphis to support labor. This altering his life, altering the path of the movement, setting the foundation for the rest of Jesse Jackson's earthly life. Sketching a path through electoral politics, as Jackson did, that might have unfolded differently had King lived, because King wasn't a politician. Jackson becomes a politician, albeit reluctantly in part. Ego-driven for sure, but mostly service-driven. Overwhelmingly service-driven. A governance-led movement. With King, for example, as that avatar, even as he was very unpopular there, because people take to change very, it can be very difficult for people to undertake change, particularly for African people or any oppressed people who have been pelted with this 6, 7 nonsense over the arc of centuries. So King is a hero in some ways and then very unpopular, comes out against the war. Imagine if a king-like figure, and we don't have one right now, came against the war. You can come against the Iran war because the whole world's against it, except BB, the international killer. BB and Bozo's Great Adventure with MBS, featuring MBS. A lot of B's. But at any rate, King was not a politician. And so a governance formation-led movement, informing engagement with a resilient, Africana-focused, Black institutions-focused, Black church, Black community, Black social organizations, Black communities focused, and not a political agenda that would lead to electoral politics necessarily. Because remember, King's assassinated in 1968. It's only 3 years after the Voting Rights Act. So we don't know what he would have done. But King, in many ways, he was a moral leader, grounded in African governance formations, Africana governance formations, and ways of knowing. I wonder what Dr. King, I don't wonder at all what Dr. King, in fact, would say about policies and politics that would try to oppress queer people. He would be 10 toes down against it. I think he's very clear about that now. When he went to his church on Sunday at Ebenezer and started talking about it, I wonder, in terms of the visceral reaction, what John Mahama last week talked about in terms of, I wonder how that politics and the governance formation like that may have played differently. Wouldn't have changed his mind. But let's be candid about the conversation. Jackson was a moral leader too, but he was different in numerous ways and did not have the momentum of the decade of clashes in the morality play that was the civil rights movement behind him to have that type of legitimacy. In many ways, what we're seeing this week, as I mentioned here, some of the things going on in terms of what we do every week, the so-called Save America Act that we see, that Bozo has said he ain't signing no legislation until he signs the voter suppression bill. I respect you, Bozo, because when we break your political back and crush you and all you little white nationalist friends, what you're doing, and you don't mean to do this because you're an idiot, as we saw this week, you have no brain. But what you are doing because of your visceral commitment to white supremacy, which is only exceeded by your visceral commitment to yourself, you egomaniac, maniacal, uh, sociopath, narcissist, what you're doing is making it impossible to compromise. We can't compromise with you. The Save America Act is the culmination of a 60-plus year fight to erase the Voting Rights Act in the United States, which really means they can't erase the 15th Amendment. This week, they're going to try at the Supreme Court to erase the 14th Amendment, but they can't erase the 15th Amendment language. They would if they could. And on Wednesday, as I said, this coming week, they're going to try to take a huge step into erasing the 14th Amendment, or at least redefining it around questions of who your loyalty is in the country. It's going to be really about loyalty. It ain't going to be about where you came out of your mother's womb, which is the plain reading of the Birthright Citizenship Clause. And I won't pause here because we've done this before. But to read from the Constitution, it's about the whose jurisdiction are you subject to. So they're going to say, if you came here without papers, then you don't get your child don't get birthright citizenship. But the next easy step will then be loyalty oaths. Well, it becomes what's called a slippery slope in the law. And every court in the country has rejected their funky ass reading of the 14th Amendment in that regard. But now it's before the Supreme Court, and you know what the Supreme Court is? 6-7. Because they're looking at the Constitution like it's 6-7. The way they making stuff up without precedent, or in the case of somebody like Amy Coney Barrett, we'll come back to that in a minute. But let me just continue this. This citizenship amendment, that you know what that leaves? That leaves the 13th Amendment, which they will continue to try to rely on for the except as punishment clause. Slavery and involuntary servitude, except slavery and involuntary servitude, 13th Amendment, the United States Constitution, except as punishment for a crime whereof the person should have been convicted, won't exist in the United States. They'll just continue to expand the things you can be criminalized. So what they're really after isn't just the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They've been waging this war for 60 years. They're after the Reconstruction Amendments, friends, because this is a white man's country, as Andrew Johnson said. It is a white nationalist project. And guess what? At the UN this week, Mahama reinforced the fact, and the vote in response to Mahama reinforced the fact that this is a white man's world, and it's ending. Oh, it's ending. So the reason they hate the United Nations is because everybody's represented there. So even symbolically, which gives it moral force, if not legal force, what you now have been put on trial continue to be put on trial for, is your crimes against humanity. Please understand, this is the final moment in the United States and in the world where these Europeans make their final death push. In the United States, they're making their final death push to redefine the outcome of the Civil War. They never stopped fighting the Civil War. I'm from Tennessee. I saw it from the time I came out of my mother's womb and can remember they never stopped fighting the Civil War. We're here week after week, in part to remind us of that, but that ain't the core of our work because we never stopped being humans. We're not slaves. We've been talking about that every week on Monday night in office hours. Let's continue. But see, in these people's minds, they never lost. And the call for reinforcements they made after the Civil War, you know what the call for reinforcements was? After the Dawes Act got passed, after they were reneged, because they are renegers, they reneged on the question, the proposition of giving land to Africans, even though that's a nettlesome task, because part of reparations is making sure that we never forget that there were people here before we were drugged here and before they came here. And the indigenous people are always part of the reparations conversation, which is why the rituals that were held at the African Burial Ground this week are so important. We never exclude the indigenous people. They were here first. Manhattan is the name of the island where the New York African Burial Ground is on. That's an indigenous word. So please understand that. In the process, though, these Europeans not only don't think they ever lost, but most of these people who are leading the charge in terms of white nationalism today, their ancestors weren't even here when the Civil War was fought. They made a call for reinforcements in the late 19th century. You know what that call was for? Migrations from Europe. And guess what? Those who came here faced the trial of fire by the white nationalists who were already here. Stephen Miller's ancestors weren't considered white. Anybody with an Italian last name who's in here now is a 10 toes down white nationalist. Scaramucci, just because you beating up on Trump now don't mean you ain't a white nationalist. Your ancestors weren't considered white. You had to pass the white test. You know what the white test was? As they said in the years of the populist movement in the 19th century, who gonna yell the N-word the loudest? You had to reject the notion of solidarity with the non-whites, and many of you did. So those of you who allowed yourself to be absorbed into whiteness, who accepted an extension and by extension an invitation into whiteness, joining those who were already here, and then when you answered that call, that invitation to whiteness, by those who learned the racism after they got here, it took the better part of the century for you to join, but you joined eventually. The right voters is what some of them call. Remember these people now talking about we need to have the right politicians elected by the right voters. That's what they're saying. Our analysis of where we are is like a 6-7. That impenetrable, meaningless phrase masquerading as a phrase meaning something. Democracy is a 6-7. The soul of America is a 6-7. The mistake we made is to try to pump meaning into a 6-7. Yeah. Come on now. We started 6 years ago, as I said. The repetition is key to us continuing to think. Because people say, well, this is like ideology. No, we are inviting study and debate and discussion. And it's not reducible to TikTok. It's not reducible to quickness. That's why we take our time with it. University of Pennsylvania, shout out to the students at the University of Pennsylvania in the Daily Pennsylvanian. They had an opinion column that ran this week in the Daily Pennsylvanian. And if I could pull it up, I'll quote from it, because I did pull up some of these things, but I might not be able to find it quickly. And if I don't and can't, I'll just refer people to look to it. But the gist of it is this, and no, I don't see it. And that's too bad, because I would have loved to have quoted from it. Oh, well, maybe I have it up here. This ain't like looking for the books for me. I don't, I'm not really into the technology like that for some reasons that they kind of talk about in their article. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, yeah, there it is, the Daily Pennsylvanian. They had an editorial that says, Penn has an AI problem. It said in 2024, Penn, University of Pennsylvania, made history by becoming the first Ivy League school to launch a major in artificial intelligence. Gutting its systems engineering major, the university justified the replacement as a program that would, quote, fit the AI-powered needs of the 21st century, end quote. Since then, AI has become intertwined with obtaining a Penn education in a completely unprecedented and potentially dangerous way. I'm going to skip down to the bottom. This is what they say. They say that, hold on, this is a advertisement somewhere. Hold on, let me, I don't even know where that is. Give me a sense, I had to stop it. Hold on. Prof, you might have to come in for a minute while I find where this ad is to get rid of it. Oh, there it is. Maybe that's it. I don't think. Oh, yeah, I see it. There it is. Thank you. Yeah. This is interesting. And I said this when I was reading this. I want you, HBCU newspapers, college newspapers, the fine papers all over the country. Hilltop, the first HBC newspaper where I worked, Howard University, the Meter at Tennessee State University, where I went to school and wrote columns for when I was student body president. All the HBC newspapers, I want y'all to step up y'all game now. It ain't enough to report on some world events and some campus events and tie a few things in. I want y'all to show us what you used to show us and what you show us at your best moments. I want you to elevate your analysis, because this social media, this technology is killing our literacy. And I'm being lovingly critical now. Let us agree, as Mariba Kelsey would say, to agree. I'm going to read y'all what they wrote in the Daily Pennsylvanian, and I want to start seeing this stuff in North Carolina and Texas. I want to start seeing it in Ohio at Central State and Wilberforce. I want to start seeing it at Cheney and Lincoln. I want to start seeing it at UDC. I want to start seeing it in Florida at A&M and Bethune-Cookman. I want to see all of these papers match this. This is what they say. They say, the irony is that as Penn pours endless money and energy into AI advancement in its attempt to get ahead, the university is only quickening its own demise. AI cannot coexist with education. It can only degrade it. As technology advances and workers are replaced by machines, schools are some of the only places, and I'm thinking now, as I'm reading this, not just universities, K-12, everybody, after school programs, these freedom schools, everybody talking about starting. And as somebody who has labored in that freedom school thing for a generation, I know what that is, and I know what it's not. Every effort is better than no effort, but every effort ain't equal. They say as technology advances and workers are replaced by machines, schools are some of the only places we have left to explore and wrestle with human thought. Yeah, but that's what we hear it in class, because we're going to do that week after week, day after day, month after month, year after year. No 6-7 here. It says, with our own university leading the charge, AI is now corrupting those few sacred spaces and leaving us with nowhere to engage in true scholarship. That's a fact. Do y'all remember, and I'm sure you do, Prof, Hillman talk? About 10 years ago, no, that wasn't true. About 5 years ago. No, that wasn't true. A couple of years ago. Anyway, do you remember? And you remember, go back in our archive. What we told y'all was going to happen has happened. Ain't nobody talking about that. You can't make no education into no TikTok video. I don't care. Can you use it as a point of entry to discover some other stuff? Absolutely. Use the technology in that way. But these young people at this Ivy League school in Philly was like, hey, y'all done spent more money than God in here. And you want to stop it. Because slow, contemplative conversation is about to be eaten, and you leading the charge. Actually, Aisha Rasco, she didn't do that. Aisha did that one. Aisha did the, hold on, it keeps going. I'm about to close this out now because they are trying to, and this is what happens. You turn on a newspaper that's on the website, and the newspaper now wants you to buy something. And so now I got to close out the, there it is. That should stop it. There it is. All right, very good. Like, y'all stop this. I hate this. This is why I still subscribe to the newspapers in part, because the newspapers are quiet. Websites. Anyway, so yeah, study can't be sustained on TikTok. You got to have deep studies sustained by apprenticeship, by quiet, by community, by perpetual community. And what ends up happening when you give it over to the boom, 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 to the 6-7 is hot takes, titillation, the hunger for feeding, perpetual distraction and stimulation. It was several years ago that we discussed stolen focus, and it continues to exhibit that behavior. That's why we're here in the way that we are. And so let's just begin to make this turn now. And we use our Africana Studies analysis to get us home. In this social structure this week, we're seeing the erosion of the nation state. That's a broad concept. It's a recent concept, this notion of countries. It's a concept that comes as a direct consequence of European expansion and imperial dreams, and it's coming to an end. This notion of free trade, domestic alliances, and sovereignty, the so-called rules-based international order, is being tested now. That's what happened at the UN. This is what really strengthens what we've been studying in Born in Blackness. Part of what is born is this, quote, rules-based nation-state order. But if you've got rules, then you got to observe the rules in order for people to continue to play by your made-up rules, your 6-7 rules. And guess what? People who have never played by them are the capitalists. We're reading about them in Born in Blackness. Spain and Portugal are metaphors, to quote Cedric Robinson in Black Marxism. They're metaphors. They're labels for commercial enterprise interests. We've been reading about the Dutch East India Company, the Royal the Royal African Company of England, coming first for the Royal London Company. These are investors. That's who created Virginia and South Carolina. That's who comes into Barbados and then Jamaica. That's the French coming into Haiti. That's the Portuguese who come down the coast of Africa to what is now Ghana, and then going out into the ocean at Sao Tome and Principe, and then going farther south into what we now know as Angola and Congo. These are commercial enterprises. The oligarchs haven't changed. This week, Elon Musk saying, I'm going to float my company and try to reach a $1.75 trillion valuation. And the Saudis, Mohammed bin Salman and them, Saudi Arabia, that's an excuse to park my wealth. I'm going to buy Jared Kushner and buy Steve Witkoff. They go into crypto anyway, and we just going to keep running this Boston. Bo's going to rep the United States. He represents the Trump crime family and his rich friends. Ask Howard Lutnick. All these people whose names may have to come off stuff as soon as the rest of them Epstein files are removed. This is important. The resistance we'll see today. No kings on Saturday. That means something, because a king is a sovereign. A sovereign is not beholden to a state. You know, you create a parliament reluctantly. Go and look at that glorious revolution, Cromwell and them boys. Go look at the Treaty of Westphalia. Anyway, those are the breadcrumbs. That's a dimension in class as well. So today, that focus on the UN, that reparations, that speech that Muhammad gave, man, when you see, let me just pause here, and you have to pause this video if you're watching it again to remind us of the archival dimension of in class. Just a little taste. Africans in the United States, oh, we talked about that. General discussion, go to session 207. Go to session 158, which was entitled Malcolm X, FBI, and Our Global Responsibility. That's when we talk about Ralph Bunche at the United Nations, at the founding of the UN. Go to session 188. In a time of war, who do we really identify with? Go to that session. About the UN on We Charge Genocide, the 1951 petition, which Paul Robeson and S.E. Robeson and Shirley Graham Du Bois and W.E.B. Du Bois and William and Louise Thompson Patterson, I'm naming couples deliberately here to talk about community, delivered to the United Nations in New York and Geneva. We talked about that in sessions. Let's go. 21, 52, 85, 109. 117, 158, 192, 204, and 207. And that's not counting the last 100 sessions. That's for We Charge Genocide, which is a precedent for what Muhammad did. South Africa taking Israel to the the International Court of Justice, session 203. Remember when Israel's bombing and killing this Gaza and West Bank business? Of course Israel voted no. I'm glad you voted no, because you shouldn't be hiding behind international law as an excuse. We know who you are. It's very important. Ralph Bunche's book, The Indispensable Man, where we talked about how Bunche works in this, how Bunche helped broker the creation of Israel, got a Nobel Prize for it. Ralph Bunche turning in his grave right now, even as he could have predicted what was going to happen. Sessions 158, 161, 163, 188, and 198. One of the sessions, I was at the UN. We were there. Please understand, intellectual CSI, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Moore Motley, we played her before the United Nations at the 77th session in September 2022. Go back and look at session 135, where we talk about that. This ain't the first time somebody stood before the whole organized world and did what they did. The 14 member nations of the United UN Security Council calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. A ceasefire. And guess who vetoing it? The United States of America. That was under Joe Biden.
Welcome.
Remember, a black woman is sitting there in the seat as the UN representative. That's session 196.
This was an interesting
a humanitarian truce called for by the General Assembly, regardless of what the U.S. did. That's in session 190.
Culture commentary from This is culture commentary from a little-known piece of history in time. Where we go far, we go alive. When it burns, as we talk, load the ground, says me child, as we talk, So we're about 4 days in. We're swimming up on 3 days in, about halfway through our conception of doing playlist theory right now. We're going through my subscription box in order to figure out, okay, so this is a specific piece of culture commentary. This is natural science. This is social science. This is a techno quick pick. This is AI culture commentary. This is tech stuff. This is esoteric culture commentary. All the different different acronyms that we have to describe different cross sections of the content that we curate. I'm jumping in right now because I was getting really tired and hypnotized a little bit, going through my subscription box and listening to In Class with Carr, episode 316, and my psyche was like, Changbe se got them boy ma somebody had a mode the music ma Samba jamada no dem banga chaya bonga so danga minga nyang gonga mane ganga no. I got my coffee, and I'm sitting here like just going through my subscription box. Let me know in the archive what you have, if you have any thoughts on where we're at, and I'll continue as I sip my coffee. Oh, let me put back on In Class with Carr.
Appropriate time for us to be in this is now. But understand, we've talked about this. We will continue to talk about it. Understand what these racists from the United States of America, with your tax dollars, this is what they said about why they said no. They said trafficking of enslaved Africans and racialized chattel enslavement of Africans is the gravest crime against humanity by reason of the definitive break in world history, scale, duration, systemic nature, brutality, and enduring consequences that continue to structure the lives of all people through racialized regimes of labor, property, and capital. That's what Muhammad said. And then here comes the white nationalist deputy United States ambassador to the UN. This is what this racist Dan Negria said. You think he's not a racist? Let me say you. He said the words, so you the point man for your criminal enterprise friends and your white nationalist friends. He called the resolution's text highly problematic in countless respects. Let me tell you something, clown. The resolution ain't with so many words. When you say countless, what you're saying is we ain't never going to recognize y'all as human, and we don't give a damn in countless respects. This is what he goes on to say. He says in a statement, he said in the statement, I got the statement pulled up here. He says the United States does not recognize a legal right for reparations for historical wrongs. I'm reading this to y'all descendants of slaves who think somehow y'all going to trick these people into court. I got a law degree. I teach at a law school. I study the law every day. And let me be crystal clear about this. Y'all so dead ass wrong. You don't understand. But I understand, as Gil Scott Heron said, you're another set of victims too whipped to choose. And we're going to help you week after week. We're going to help you because we know that many of you are not saying this out of animosity. It's a visceral response that I share. And to get a solution, you got to be in conversation with your memory. This is important. Let me see what he says. This is what your master said. He said that the United States does not recognize a legal right to reparations for historical wrongs that were not illegal under international law at the time they occurred. And I know some of y'all got an answer for that. You think you do. Come on in, officers. Let's talk about it. I'm going to walk you through why you're wrong. He goes on and says the United States also strongly objects to the resolution's attempt to rank crimes against humanities in any type of hierarchy. That's what the French dude said, too. I listened to their response. Goes on finally and says the assertion that some crimes against humanity are less severe than others is objectively diminishes the suffering of countless victims and survivors of other atrocities through history. Fine. That answered Paul and S.E. Robeson when they in 1951 numbered the lynchings. That happened in real time. Why are you doing this with Palestine? Why are you letting your Lord and Master Trump go and bomb everybody in Iran and the regions? And why are you letting Israel destroy southern Lebanon and create a huge refugee crisis per capita? The largest number of refugees in the world in one country are in Lebanon. Come on now. Don't do it or do it. I love when you do it because it makes it easier for the rest of us to say we oppose you every way possible. We ain't gonna kill you, but we're gonna stop you from killing us. Please understand, they always cry when they make these statements, something called jus cogens. Jus is J-U-S. Cogens, C-O-G-E-N-S. It means compelling law. It means peremptory norms. It means international law. In international law, what it's saying is there are some crimes that are moral crimes that transcend whenever the notion of nation states was created. But they always cry that these kinds of crimes against humanity, all this kind of stuff, the Western nations in particular do this because their law is amoral. They claim it's morality, but it's 6-7. Nah, it don't mean nothing. It don't mean nothing to you, which means it shouldn't mean anything to us. They always cry this though. They say jus cogens doesn't apply to slavery. No, that trap, there weren't any rules. Here, and I'm gonna help y'all blackface nativists, the ADOS, the foundational Black Americans, even the B1s who say black first. And I'm saying, is black first Pan-African? Because that would make John Muhammad a B1. It certainly would make Nkrumah a B1. It would make, no. By black, they mean Black American. And they also mean capitalist. They mean somehow they can beat capitalism in its own game. I'm gonna tell you that's a dead strategy. Even as we still gotta spend money and build institutions, please understand that philosophically, you're moving toward a dead end. But at any rate, let me just get to this point. They always cry, and I mean these Western nations cry that slavery can't be used under this concept of jus cogens, because jus cogens are crimes that are so huge that they exist before there was international law. Please understand what I mean by this. Here are the categories. Here are some of the categories of jus cogens. Prohibition of aggression. You ain't supposed to fight nobody. Okay, that's a human rights thing. Comes before countries, like they observe it. 6-7. Prohibition on genocide. This is what they used in 1951. Robeson and Du Bois and them. Prohibition of crimes against humanity. This is what Muhammad was using. Basic rules of international humanitarian law. This is the thing that BB, Bozo, and MBS are violating as we speak. prohibition of racial discrimination and apartheid. This is why you have that being brought before the United Nations as well. Prohibition of slavery, prohibition of torture, right to self-determination. This is why I think it's very important for us to never forget my sister Nkechi Taifa. This is her book, Reparations on Fire, which is a companion piece to her memoir we talked about last week, Black Power, Black Lawyer. But at the end of this book, because she is a co-author, the last co-author who's not an ancestor, the appendix, which begins on page 118, is a very important document where she, Baba Amari Obadele, and the good brother Baba Chokwe Lumumba, in a little document called Reparations, yes, make the legal case for reparations, which they connect to the United Nations. And domestically, they connect to the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And here's where I want to tie something together that adds to their analysis. When you cry that there are laws that transcend international law, please understand that the domestic dimension of that is the reparation struggle here in the United States, in terms of the United States. But the same theory that I have that Western law is amoral and you have to apply Western frameworks to this, this is why that case still holds up. Because at the United Nations, and even at the admission of the Western nations who would vote no, like the United States did, or abstain like those European countries did, and the ones they got hostage to this resolution at the UN, they would still say, however, that anything that happens now and in the future is fair game. It's fair game. Now let's look at the domestic application of that here in the United States. What they are trying to do is to say that anything that happened before it was not legal in terms of their legal framework, you can't do anything about. That's why they're against reparations, internationally and domestically. How's that working out domestically, and how does that relate to what we're talking about right now in the United States of America? That is the theory by which they will say anything that happened before the 60s, and now even the legislation of the 60s is wrong for two reasons. One, we're not going to deal with addressing anything that happened when it was legal, like slavery. That's why they changed the focus on affirmative action from redressing past conduct to using race. That was Lewis Powell, that same punk who was Supreme Court Justice who helped write the opinion in Bakke, who also wrote the Powell Memorandum and said we need some think tanks to help uphold our capitalism and Christian values. That's what led to the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, a direct connection. Here's the second thing. They also then would say that this theory that you can only apply things to current and future conduct and you can't deal with the past, that's why now they're going into court, as they're going to do with this birthright citizenship case next week, and say, y'all are misreading the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Those amendments were never put in place to address what you're raising now. In terms of birthright citizenship, they did not mean everybody born here is a citizen. What they meant is everybody born here who is subject to our jurisdiction. And that's vague. And in trying to do that, trying to displace birthright citizenship, they're after all the non-whites or anybody else they don't want here. And that will slide into, are you loyal to the United States? I heard you say some things. Well, it's the First Amendment. Damn the First Amendment. Well, the 14th Amendment says I'm a citizen. Not anymore. In other words, they're trying now to erase all of the attempts to define this country relative to an expanded version of our humanity. And they want to constrict it to the white nationalist version. But it requires them going back into history and either erasing history or interpreting it in a way to say this is beyond the ability of anybody to use the law to protect your rights. This lies at the intersection of international human rights and domestic constitutional law in the United States of America. And if you think it's not a threat, you're not paying attention. So let me wind this up. Watching these statements after President Muhammad spoke at the UN was so inspirational because he was grounding it in a moral standard and attaching it to an international legal standard that the white nationalists can't
Christians
stop.
Or people who are interested.
They couldn't stop it last week by the vote of 123.
Contemporary religion, kind of wondering why the show never did Christian figures or Jewish figures or religious icons that might be somebody in your audience might be a devotee of. The comment was Jesus a Tok'ra? Is this thought about in the writer's room, and is there a reason why you stayed away from figures that people in your audience might be venerating?
I think it's just too current and prevalent in people's minds and, obviously lives that didn't feel like we were, I don't know, just because the other stuff feels more kind of ancient and discoverable as opposed to, just the day-to-day existence. And also, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there are people out there that were, incredibly offended by our portrayal of Thor. But it just feels like it was further away from what people feel so strongly about right now. I mean, these things are, you don't need to go very far to see how strongly these issues affect people's daily lives. And we were really not, for the sake of entertainment, interested in taking a stand on those issues. It's just it becomes what I guess executives and studios nowadays call political, even though it's not political, it's religious. But politics and religion have become very intertwined.
But sort of, I imagine, unnecessarily encroaching on what the audience would hold dear, whether that's their faith or their politics.
Yeah, and there were certainly, historians who got offended by our representation of certain historical.
It's a TV
Okay,
show.
well, this is interesting, right? The show takes a lot of liberties with the ancient history and the ancient mythology. How much of, in your mind as writers, how much of the stories that are told, right, the mythology of ancient Egypt, come from how the Goa'uld themselves acted, and how much was it sort of existing stories that they took on, right? They assumed this persona with all of its backstory. Is it sort of one or the other, or is it both and?
Yeah, I mean, some of it was, I think, inspired by the movie. Like, I think, you look at the the idea that, oh, okay, this person is Ra. How would Ra have acted in that time? There was this, and how would Ra have acted if they were also very God-like, if that God were on Earth? So yeah, I think it's a extrapolation of that, and people seemed to, like, they seemed to respond to the initial sort of representation of Apophis, and so things kind of just went from there. If it hadn't worked, I think there would have pivoted. But
let me ask the question a different way. In your mind, is Apophis the real Apophis, or is he a snake who is pretending to be Apophis?
Yes, 100%. In my mind, he is not the real Apophis. Yeah, I mean, he, knew of the story, and said, I'm going to do that. It's cosplay to a certain extent. It's alien cosplay.
That's great. It's Goa'uld cosplay. That's the perfect metaphor.
Yeah. Well, look at the clothes. How can it not be anything else?
Yeah, and again, that's another reason why, I think the show worked and sort of hooked into the science fiction audience.
Yeah, and then future stories get told and then woven into ancient Earth mythology. I'm thinking of things like Seth's interactions with Osiris, sort of rising up and trapping Osiris, and That's a piece of lore that you can find in a history textbook today, but you came around and gave it an explanation that it was after the Goa'uld started impersonating these figures, this event happened that then got recorded in this way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no one really talked too much about the fact that Thor was also cosplaying, and like he was an alien, he was a gray, didn't have nefarious intentions. I think he would have said, he didn't think humans were ready to interact with the Asgard on the level that they
This
existed,
is so interesting because it's so many levels deep into fan fiction. We're
protecting them a little bit.
We're talking
or
with the
maybe they were
executive
actually,
producer
pandering
and
to them a
writer
little bit
of the Stargate franchise.
Using the Norse holograms are a bit like Starfleet going incognito, right? Dressing up as the alien race before first contact has been made in order to walk among them.
Well, O'Neill chews on the High Council a little bit for that very reason in Red Sky, and the Asgard are the first to say, "Yeah, you're right. This is what we're doing."
Yeah, they look down on humans.
As the show moves forward, there is a fascinating exploration of faith and religion, particularly vis-a-vis the Jaffa characters, and then later Daniel. When we get into Ascension, we get to Keb and Maternal Instinct, and we recognize that what's going on Keb, right before we even know that Oma Dasala is there, helping people on this spiritual or maybe pseudo-spiritual journey to a higher plane of existence. And she's been doing this with Jaffa apparently for generations. Braytak comes to Keb with that sort of faith, right? That this is a mythical place. This is a place where Jaffa can find some freedom from their oppression and sort of move beyond those chains. Talk to us, if you would, a bit about the introduction of Oma Dasala and the concept of ascension and what that gave you tools to play around with.
I felt like what I have always believed in was an ability to, or an aspiration to want to better yourself somehow. And that just extrapolates into how do we become the greatest version of ourselves that we can be. I've honestly never been very successful with meditation, but I am super interested in it. I wish I was better at it. But yeah, that whole sort of more Buddhist way of living your life, and I always sort of looked at Buddhism and the Dalai Lama as a something that I sort of thinking wise aspire to, and I wouldn't say I'm aligned with it. It's just it seemed like something I wanted to try and bring into the show. This idea of being able to use your mind to internally make yourself better so that you could better deal with the external world. And what would the ultimate version of that be? Like, what would the equivalent in the Buddhist world be to going to heaven in the Catholic world, right? Where you get to go to a better place, I'm saying that Buddhism even has that component to it. It's more that if you extrapolated that, if you could control your physiology on the most basic atomic level, what would the possibilities be? And so that's where kind of Ascension came into my mind. Was like, what would happen if you could, quote, go to heaven, but through some other process other than a powerful deity deeming that you're worthy of that. So in other words, if it was not about your behavior on earth and going to a different place, but rather an evolution of humanity. So I felt like the Jaffa, having been subjugated, I would use the word enslaved, by not, by the Gould, and maybe more so than any other, ongoing character in the show. They were the sort of symbol of that. It struck me that they would also want to find something other than another god. So, it's like, we're not going to replace Jimmy with Frank. We're going to look within ourselves to find strength. So that felt like a sort of, for lack of a better way of putting it, spiritually interesting way to go with those characters. That they found strength within themselves instead of looking elsewhere for it.
To 3, which other people say, that's all right. The world recognizes it. We know you got a Security Council. We know you got all that, but let's be crystal clear. We also know that the world is on the side of a moral right. And the world isn't any politician, John Mahama or Donald Trump. The world isn't any politician, whether it be Vladimir Putin, MBS, or the white nationalists in the federal legislature in the United States. The world is the people. There's a distinction between the people of the world and the nation-state frameworks in terms of world leaders. And most world leaders who are the most effective are not elected. John Mahama brought two things together because he was the avatar for it. But let's be crystal clear. And at Lincoln University, I hope you will now either restore that honorary doctorate you were going to give John Mahama and whatever else you need to do to make that right, because you missed your moment. You missed your moment. Thank you, Prof. Yes, the Fitzgerald would say that. But then what Howard would say is that they're the oldest continuously published. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, the Fitzgerald, because that's Du Bois's era. And yes, he was there. But at 68, 78, 88, he is just before he came. That's exactly right, to Fitzgerald. But there was a moment when they ceased publication. And so Howard would say, well, we came in after that. So they're absolutely right. Yes, thank you. But in this moment, please understand that Mahama, in making that moral declaration, is not a man without flaws. He's a politician. So Lincoln, restore that honorary doctorate for John Mahama and invite him back to campus for the discussion specifically around this legislation. Now, we don't have all the facts. Did they invite him and he said no, and as a consequence, they didn't have the thing? Maybe that's what happened. Maybe it didn't happen. But y'all got some splaining to do if you want to continue to say that historically black colleges are part of a different tradition. Otherwise, don't be a blackface school, because he spoke at Temple, and the first thing he did was shout out Lincoln, and it broke my heart because I looked at the look on the man's face, and maybe I projected that look from my own spirit onto his face, and maybe I didn't, but I'm crystal clear about this. We got to have that conversation, and we should have that conversation. We should not leave that out, the social structures. But after he spoke at the UN, what I saw was so beautiful there, because the representative from Colombia stood up and came after Muhammad and said, yes, we support this. And that's in part because we have the blood of Africa and we are indigenous. We said, oh my God. Then you saw the Caribbean representatives stand up. There's, man, one by one, the Haitian brothers stood up. Good Lord, they had but 2 minutes. Go watch it. It's on the UN's channel, YouTube channel, wherever you want to watch it. The Haitian representatives stood up and basically said, we support this because obviously we the ones who ended it in the Western Hemisphere. If I had been there, it would put me out of the room, because I'd just been, you could hear clapping, and then after they finish, you hear everybody clapping, and then they pan the room, and you see those people there. Oh my God. They even had a non-governmental organization who has observer status. There were 2 I saw with observer status. One was the young man who stood up, African person, from an NGO and said, we support this on behalf of the people of the world. It's beautiful. And the other was the Pope's people, the Holy See. That's right, the Vatican stood up. I'm like, man, see, if you ever get a chance, I told my students this Thursday after I watched it, I said, listen, there was a time when I would have gotten these people to squeeze out a couple of dollars and took y'all on the bus to go see the UN, but I done got old, and plus we've jailbroken the university, so if you want to do that now with me, you got to do it with the people. In other words, we should all meet up at the UN sometime and just tour the UN. We got plenty of people in there who are with us, obviously, but I'm kind of now away from the, from the how I'm not, because we was going to do intellectual CSI with Howard students before freshman seminar ended, before COVID, and then they took it from us, no problem. And I'm happy. Why? Because now we get the tight crew. We're going to tour as we're planning for this week, this year, to do that with just people generally, which is where it should be. The community should be grounded. But when you go to the United Nations, that spirit was in their room, and they were clapping. It was a fundamental question raised for me, because at the African Burial Ground, as you say, Prof, and this is where I'm talking about, at Temple, you had those who consider themselves Black nativists, descendants of slaves, who think somehow that this is going to somehow be something that they can square in this legal framework that's really a 6-7, protesting. How y'all standing across from the burial ground protesting Africans laying a wreath on behalf of you? But I understand. Here's the fundamental question. We've been working through for 6, going into our 7th year, which people who are confused about this are approaching, because you look at the law and don't understand that's a 6-7. What makes you identify so deeply? What makes us identify so deeply with our master, your former master, and so deeply against those who are from where you came from? Understand, there were no countries in Africa either. And just like there were no countries in Europe, there were no countries in what we now call the United States or the Western Hemisphere. Those countries didn't exist. The people were there. They had names like England and France, but they're very much in formation. And on the continent, they had Ghana, Mali, Songhai. As we've been studying, we see Ouida, we see Boni, we see the Congo, Kingdom of Congo. We see those formations, but we have to understand that everybody in them did not participate in trafficking. And the idea these 8 hours people had, they so crazy now, they're like, oh, we should be looking to Ghana to pay us. It wasn't no Ghana. Just like it wasn't, they should be going to England for reparations. It wasn't no England in the way you think about England. But England that we know, and France and Spain and Portugal and Holland, those countries literally grew into nation states by suckling at the breast of your mother. And you want to fight your mama? Because they were forced into a position to these places that you somehow also don't identify with, except you identify with their children who crossed the ocean. You've been driven crazy, but we got something for you. We got something to help us, and that's the governance formation. President Mahama, brother, you got to have a conversation about that legislation, and it should have been at Lincoln, where an exhibit on Kwame Nkrumah that was there to welcome the president starts with a quote from Kwame Nkrumah in his book, his autobiography, Ghana, and Nkrumah said, quote, "It is far better to be free to govern or misgovern yourself than to be governed by anybody else." That is a governance statement from the man who Muhammad said got his foundation in the diaspora, in the African world, in Pennsylvania from Africans. African global solidarity can be interpreted in a place that's hostile to it, like the United States, as domestic terrorism, as representing foreign countries. Jared Kushner, Wickoff, they ain't representing foreign countries because they got your tax money and they getting it. Pete Hegseth ain't Donald Trump he is not representing a foreign country, whether it be Vladimir Putin's Russia or Mohammed bin Salman Saudi Arabia, because he's in power. And as he said this week, when they said, well, how can you vote in Florida in a mail-in ballot and nobody else can vote, and you want the people you don't want anybody else to be voting mail-in? He said, you know why? Because I'm the president. I love Bozo. Bozo's showing y'all 6-7. It ain't no rules. Make me. Guess what? We're going to make you, Bozo. We're going to break your political back. And when we break it, we're going to stomp on it and grind the sawdust that you and your people can't do it any other time. Any other time. The ways of knowing. Africana community is a principle. So is commitment to family. Those get conflated, I think, in part because of Western style Christianity, and in part because of these Africana formations. We got a problem we got to deal with as African people. So we square our commitment to our common humanity with difference. And in order to answer it as the representative from West Africa, from Guinea, who stood up after Muhammad and
The
said,
left in
we
Islam
support
make
this
no
resolution.
sense.
And in fact, this must lead to larger conversations. He said, we got solutions to how we live together in this world. And our solutions will come from the Mali Charter. You should go look at that. Oh, I said, oh, my man, this is what we talking about. He said, this is a part of repair. If you want to know how to deal with questions of anti-LGBTQ legislation, you can't look to the Western legal framework. Let's go ask how this question may have been addressed with solutions deriving from Africana legal frameworks that predate captivity and that Mali Confederation, that Mali Charter, that African approach to consensus and decision making that this brother from Guinea brought up in his 2-minute speech supporting that resolution. See, it's a difference between saying you know about something and knowing about something. Turn TikTok off and take your time and think about it. Movement and memory. Even as the war in Iraq, $2 million per boat now they're saying that they may charge for people going through the Strait of Hormuz. Who knows? Destruction of the World War II order is in place now. It's moving against it now. And so it's important for us to understand that. I'll end with this. This is our brother, Brian Stevenson. This is in today's paper. This is in the Financial Times. He's being interviewed here by Edward Luce. Hope is our superpower. I agree with him. Ed Luce, if y'all listen to Sirius XM Wednesday mornings, Luce writes a column in the Financial Times, which I find particularly illuminating. And so I read from it just about every Wednesday morning, sometime between 7 in the morning and 10. Usually it's in the 7 a.m. hour, where I try to throw out some topics, some news topics.
I'm getting distracted because I'm watching Call of Duty Major 2.
But this is what
Day 2.
The good brother, Brian Stevenson. In Montgomery, Alabama, Ed Luce, the Brit, travels to Montgomery to talk with this good brother about his project there, about the Equal Justice Institute, about the museums and the memory stuff. They're sitting at the hotel that they own, the nonprofit owns, which we were at a couple of weeks ago. We didn't stay there, but we went by there to see it. It's right across from the latest of the 3 monuments in Montgomery. It's very powerful. He says, he said, Ed Luce writes, how does Stevenson feel about the direction of today's America? He said that Stevenson returns to the subject of history.
But we need to get
through our
playlist, so
he
I'm
insists.
going to try to.
He says, but he also confesses to fear. America has never said never again to slavery and bigotry in the way Germany has said never again to its darkest past, he says. Then he goes on. Brother Stevenson, my brother, Germany said never again in Germany. And as he says, they got all these monuments there to remind them never again. Germany, 6-7, abstained when put on the world stage about that resolution. And who they did it to, or at least they claim, they do claim this true. Who they did it to, the Jews who were in those camps, their descendants, their representative voted no. In class with Carr, Narrative Nubia, all the work we're doing here, certainly this metronome on Saturdays as we leave our 6th cycle and go to our 7th cycle. We're against 6-7 as a meaningless term. What we are for is understanding with great clarity who we are, who we have been to each other, what our ways of knowing are, our cultural meaning making, passing that on through movement and memory, using this science and technology to dismantle any social structure that prevents us in our self-determining way to speak to ourselves and to speak to the world and make this a better place. There he is.
Yes, let me bring myself back in. Beautiful, beautiful. I think I like the rhythm of starting where we end where we started for the people who come late, and then they get to see it all tied together. This is beautiful. Sitting with you every week is so inspiring. The breadcrumbs, but also the message, it just fortifies. We're going to get through this. And we're going to thrive. We're not just trying to survive. We're not just trying to get by. This is going to be the time. Appreciate it. All right. Love you. Love everybody else. Okay.
This success goes to all of you, but most of all, it goes to those who people wanted to be forgotten. This has gone on a record, and the record of the universal body that we all accept, the United Nations, that this was the gravest crime against humanity. Our ancestors must be rejoicing in their graves. And all the torture and adversity they went through, they must be happy that this day the world has recognized that they are not forgotten, and that the pain they went through and the torture they went through has been recognized by the United Nations, the world's highest body that we all ascribe to. Before we went to the UN today, we went to the African burial grounds, and we all know the history behind the African burial grounds. We said Christian prayers, we said Muslim prayers, we said traditional African prayers. We poured libation and called on our ancestors to stand behind us in what we're going to do today. And today, I think that they answered our call. Yep. And we achieved success. But this is not the end. This is the beginning. What we've achieved today creates a platform for the struggle for reparatory justice. And so we must not rest because we have achieved this success. We must take this success and begin to work so that those who denied our ancestors their humanity, those who denied our ancestors their dignity, can accept the truth that this is what happened. The revisionists and all those who would seek to erase them out of the footnotes of history. Today, we've accepted that this was a grave crime against humanity, the gravest indeed, and that the next steps in terms of reparations, in terms of justice, in terms of apology, are what we need to work on. And we need to keep this coalition. We can't achieve it alone. This victory is not for Ghana. We did it for the whole Africa and all people of African descent. And I believe that if we keep this coalition, we will take the next steps together. And I'm sure that the unity that we have shown will lead us to the end, so that at the time that we have gotten to the destination, our ancestors, humanity, and their dignity will be restored once again. Today's victory is to ensure that we do not forget, and will never forget. As long as this resolution has been passed, our ancestors will never, ever be forgotten.
Okay, we just finished In Class with Carr, episode 316.
All the industries you thought weren't going to be disrupted by AI are about to be disrupted.
So right now, OpenAI is in the midst of executing what might be one of the more dramatic strategic pivots it's done so far. So it's simultaneously restructuring how it sells, what it builds, and who builds it, all while preparing for a potential IPO later this year. So on the enterprise side, Reuters reports that OpenAI is pursuing partnerships with multiple private equity firms in deals potentially worth a combined $10 billion. These firms include places like TPG, Advent International, Bain Capital, Brookfield Asset Management, and others. And the PE investors would contribute approximately $4 billion and receive equity stakes, board seats, and influence over how OpenAI's technology gets deployed across their portfolio companies. So the logic here is that private equity firms control massive portfolios of enterprise companies and influence their tech spending. So this partnership gives OpenAI a distribution channel directly into those businesses. Now, notably, Anthropic is also reportedly courting private equity, including Blackstone, signaling that this may become a standard go-to-market playbook for some of these frontier AI companies. Now, on the product side, OpenAI is consolidating its web browser, Atlas, ChatGPT as a whole, and its Codex coding tool into a single unified desktop, what they call super app. So Fiji Simo, who leads OpenAI's applications division, confirmed this move, saying the company is cutting back on, quote, side quests to focus on coding and business users. At an all-hands meeting on March 16th, Simo laid out the commercial goal that they want to convert OpenAI's 900 million users into, quote, high compute users by turning ChatGPT from a consumer chatbot into a productivity instrument built around agentic AI. Now, interestingly, they're facing quite a bit of competitive pressure on this front. So according to enterprise software vendor Ramp, the proportion of businesses using Anthropic increased from 1 in 25 to nearly 1 in 4 within a single year. And Anthropic currently wins approximately 70% of direct comparisons against OpenAI in new enterprise contracts. Now, meanwhile, at the same time, OpenAI is also going all in on fully automated AI research. So founding OpenAI member Andrej Karpathy went viral this past week. We talked about this last week, describing kind of an experiment where he deployed an autonomous AI coding agent to run continuous research for 2 days. It calls it Auto Researcher. And basically this agent, like we discussed, executed hundreds of experiments, discovered new optimizations, and sped up how well the model itself worked in terms of its training time. Now, interestingly, Shopify's CEO tested the same approach on his internal company data, running an agent overnight that conducted dozens of experiments and improved performance by almost 20%. Now, the point here is that Karpathy says all frontier AI labs will adopt this approach, calling it, quote, the final boss battle these labs face. So there are reports that OpenAI is following suit, going all in on this idea of trying to build an AI researcher. Now, lastly, they are reportedly nearly doubling their headcount, according to the Financial Times and Bloomberg, over the next year as they scale across all of these initiatives simultaneously. So, Paul, maybe connect the dots for me here. OpenAI is making some pretty big, pretty sudden changes.
Yeah, so the trend I was referring to is, this goes back to episode 189 of the podcast on January 6th. So right out of the holidays was when Claude Code sort of blew up, and it became very hot over those last 2 weeks of 2025. And we spent an entire segment of the episode talking about what was happening with Claude Code and how something had definitely changed. And so that was the starting point. And all the major AI labs are in this accelerating race for autonomous agents and enterprise customers. So that's the thing I referenced. Like, when we first started the outline for this podcast yesterday, there was just this focus on OpenAI. But when you look in the totality of all the articles we're looking at, all the tweets we're seeing, you see that this everything has changed to this refocus on agents and enterprises, which was not really OpenAI's core. It's not like they weren't going after that audience, and they weren't building agents before, but Claude Code changed things, and you and I, Mike, can attest to this. Like, it's incredible. Like, within Claude, the ability to build things, I'll give an actual example a little later on in this episode, but it changed things, and they're ahead of everyone, very clearly ahead when you use the product. So I'll break down a little bit the OpenAI thing, but I want to get into the bigger picture. So you mentioned the Fiji Simo's talk about, like, private equity firm, that they're in these advanced talks, and that both OpenAI and Anthropic are aggressively courting these PE firms, which makes a ton of sense. And we've talked about this a little bit before on previous episodes, but Anthropic, as you mentioned, is winning in this space. So OpenAI's enterprise business, according to Reuters, is $10 billion out of the total analyzed revenue, about $25 billion right now. And so that's a run rate. They're not actually at $25 billion yet in a year, but that's the run rate they're on right now. And then she tweeted on March 16th, this news came out a little earlier than we planned. We're excited to be building a deployment arm, and we'll share more details soon. So that's what we're talking about, this idea of kind of getting out with these frontier alliances where they're actually working with the consulting firms and stuff. So there's just a lot going on where they're trying to get to where the enterprise customers are. And then when it started getting into this idea of refocusing, which is interesting because I remember last fall we were talking about this, like all of a sudden Sam Altman's like everywhere. They're going to do space stuff. They're going to do robots again. They're going to, build the video gen apps and social networks and devices with Johnny Ive. Like they're just everywhere. And it was like, whoa, like you're getting crushed right now on the model side. Like, why don't you focus on the model side? And it appears they've come to realize that. So, Fiji tweeted on March 19th, companies go through phases of exploration and phases of refocus. Both are critical, but when new bets start to work, like we're seeing now with Codex, which is their version, like Claude Code, it's very important to double down on them and avoid distractions. Really glad we're seizing the moment. I remember when I first saw that tweet, I was like, that's weird. Like, it's just a weird tone on a tweet, like almost like people were questioning whether she was behind this focus, because that's not what she was brought there to do. Like, she was in part brought to diversify, like based on her background. So I think some people may have taken this news as almost like a slight against what she was supposed to be doing there. I don't know, but that's how I read that tweet. Was like, wow, that's a really interesting, trying to set the tone that you're behind all this rah-rah kind of stuff. So that was in relation to the Wall Street Journal article that said OpenAI plans the launch of desktop super app to refocus, simplify user experience. In that, there was a quote that we realized we were spreading our efforts across too many apps and stacks and that we need to simplify our efforts. That was from Simu. That fragmentation has really been slowing us down and making it harder to hit the quality bar we want. It said top executives, including Altman, Chief Research Officer Mark Chen, and Simu have spent the last few weeks reviewing OpenAI's product portfolio and looking at areas to deprioritize. And in an all-hands meeting, she told employees they couldn't afford to be distracted by those side quests you mentioned, and that they're in this major battle with Anthropic, and it's basically like a code red internally. This is all related to this idea of a fully automated researcher, which isn't news, and we've talked about this being something they were working on for at least the last year.
Yeah.
But I think it's starting, the timeline is maybe starting to come more clear. So they said their new research goal is the North Star for these next few years, pulling together multiple research strands, including work on reasoning models, agents, and interpretability, meaning like knowing what the models are doing and why they're doing it. And then there's even a timeline. OpenAI plans to build, quote, an autonomous AI research intern, a system that can take a small number of specific research problems by itself by September. A lot of what Andrej Karpathy is talking about is sort of a prelude to this stuff. And so the AI intern will be the precursor to a fully automated multi-agent research system that the company plans to debut in 2028. It's a weird timeline to me. I don't know why it would be like that long. But anyway, this AI researcher, OpenAI says, will be able to tackle problems that are too large or complex for humans to cope with. You mentioned the idea of these side projects, what that means. I mean, you hear side projects, it could be things like the Sora video generation app, like the standalone app. I gotta think the planned hardware devices fit into this bucket. If you didn't spend the $6 billion on Johnny Ive, like but I gotta imagine that there's a chance that you get delays in the hardware because that's hard. It's a difficult thing to pursue, and that could definitely be a major distraction. And then e-commerce features in ChatGPT, you could see those kind of get sidelined. So there's lots of interesting things they've been doing that could get sidelined in all of this. And then you mentioned in the same time, they're doubling headcount. So they're aiming to grow to about 8,000 employees. They're at about 4,500 today, according to Financial Times. And then, overall, it's like it creates this muddied relationship continuing with Microsoft as well. So
Mike kaput.
Again, when I started zooming out, it's like, well, what's going on with all the other labs? Like, we hear so much lately about the challenges Microsoft and OpenAI are having as they tried to reimagine that relationship so that OpenAI could get in a position to go public. And in the process, they allowed them to start developing partnerships with people like Oracle and AWS, which I'll talk about in a moment. So then we get into the Microsoft thing. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this one in a rapid fire, and we'll drill into this. But the premise is Microsoft made a major shift last week where they're moving Copilot under Satya Nadella. So they're actually moving it under another executive, Jacob Andrew, but then he reports directly to Satya, and they're taking Mustafa Suleyman, who was in charge of Microsoft AI, and he's going to like just run the super intelligence lab, it sounds like. At the same time, Microsoft, according to Financial Times, is weighing legal action over $50 billion Amazon OpenAI cloud deal. So now we have this weird muddying of relationships between Amazon and OpenAI. You have XAI, so one of the other major labs. There's basically 5 major labs in the U.S. XAI, Elon Musk tweets on March 12th. This is following lots of turnover at that AI lab. A lot of the co-founders have left in the last 60 days. He tweeted, XAI was not built right first time around, so is being rebuilt from foundations up. Same thing happened with Tesla. So you have XAI, one of the major labs is, according to Elon Musk, in basically a complete, reset mode. And this is a month after, on February 12th, they got acquired by his other company, SpaceX. So just 40 days ago, SpaceX, who also Elon Musk's company, said on Monday it had acquired XAI, the AI company controlled by Musk, to consolidate his empires and kind of build this, one unified company. So that combined company now includes X, like the Twitter platform, and includes XAI, and then they have a deep relationship now with Tesla, his other company. At the same time, Musk is suing OpenAI, like that, and that's supposed to go to trial in like April, right? Like I think that's moving to an act.
It is.
So you have this crazy thing, but Elon Musk is watching what's happened with agents and enterprise. He wants a piece of that, and he realizes, wow, we didn't build this the right way. Let's just hit the reset button. And nobody hits the reset button faster than Musk. Like if something's not working, he's going to blow it up. Then you have Meta. We talked about this. So March 12th, Meta delays rollout of new AI model after performance concerns. So they're spending over $15 billion last year just on talent acquisition. So they're investing heavily. They're rumored to be spending $135 billion this year on like CapEx to build out the future of everything. And it doesn't seem to be working yet. Like they haven't released a major model since they acquired Alexander Wang and Scale AI. So Meta's sort of in upheaval. They've kind of fallen off. It's like them and XAI are just sort of like down at the bottom right now. You had Jan LeCun leave XAI, but then Meta shows up and buys Moltbook, the AI agent social network that went viral because of fake posts back in earlier this year. So Meta is trying to get in and have a piece of this agent game. They'd probably love to play in the enterprise world, but that's not their natural thing. Then you have Jensen Huang talking last week about OpenClaw being the next ChatGPT. So there's a CNBC article that says Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, on Tuesday pointed to a fast-rising AI project called OpenClaw as a major step forward in how people interact with artificial intelligence. He said it is now the largest, most popular, the most successful open source project in the history of humanity. This is definitely the next ChatGPT. OpenClaw is an open sourced autonomous agent platform that goes beyond traditional chatbots. Instead of answering questions, these agents can complete tasks, make decisions, and take actions with minimal input from users. NVIDIA moved quickly to build around OpenClaw's momentum. The chip leader on Monday announced NemoClaw, an enterprise-grade version of OpenClaw that layers NVIDIA's software stack and tools on top of the platform. And then you have Google DeepMind. So Google, came in hot with Gemini 3. It was great. Like, it's powerful. They've just last week announced some major improvements to Gemini within Google Workspace, which we experience, Mike, every day. We use Google Workspace and we embed Gemini. They've had kind of a runaway success with Notebook LM. Even though, when you talk to the average business user, they have no idea what Notebook LM is. So, in our bubble, Notebook LM is amazing, and we talk about it all the time. We have courses on it. The average person has no idea what it is or how to use it. So they've had success building these individual apps like Notebook LM and Gemini. They announced a major investment last week in AI Studio, where they're trying to get into the vibe coding game, so trying to play along with like how Claude Code and stuff is. But the reality is AI Studio is still for developers. Like I don't know how to use it. I went in there last week. I was like, okay, maybe it's like ready for me to use it. And it's like, no, it's not. So Gemini, while amazing, Google DeepMind incredible, they have no answer to Claude Code right now. Like it's running circles around them. And based on what a Google engineer said, so we talked about this on episode 189, Yana Dogan, a principal engineer at Google, on January 2nd, tweeted, so this is them saying it, not us. He said, I am not joking, and this isn't funny. We have been trying to build distributed agent orchestrators, which is exactly what we're talking about with like OpenClaw and Claude Code, at Google since last year. There are various options. Not everyone is aligned. I still can't believe this tweet was allowed to go out. I gave Claude Code a description of the problem. It generated what we built last year in an hour. It wasn't a very detailed prompt, and it contained no real details, given I cannot share anything proprietary. I was building a toy version on top of some of the existing ideas to evaluate Claude Code. It was a 3-paragraph description. And then when will Gemini get to this point? I think someone asked. He said, we're working hard on it right now, the models and the harness. And then I thought this was really interesting, Mike. So Logan Kilpatrick, who's sort of like, head of AI developer relations, basically. So he's like a major player within Google DeepMind, came from OpenAI. He tweeted, I couldn't believe I saw this tweet. And I was like, holy shit, that's going to come down fast. And it did. He deleted it. It said, I think this was on Saturday, all the industries you thought weren't going to be disrupted by AI are about to be disrupted. They're not allowed to say that. Like,
yep. Google customers are reading that saying, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. 100% true. You can't say that. And so someone got that down real fast. So Google's sort of like in this crazy phase where they're trying to build it into Gemini. They're trying to make it like function within the productivity tools that they have, while DeepMind is telling you that like every industry is going to be changed. So then I'll wrap here with what I think is if you want to, you got to be ready for the technical stuff when you listen to Andrej Karpathy. Like Mike and I talk about Andrej all the time. He ran Tesla Computer Vision for 5 years, co-founder of OpenAI, did a bounce back to OpenAI for about a year. Now he's an independent researcher. He's been on fire on X the last like 3 weeks, just like all these crazy things he's working on. But he did an interview on the No Priors podcast. Again, if you're ready for the technical side of this, listen to this episode. We'll put it in the show notes. A few key notes that I was listening to this yesterday, actually. So a few key things. He was talking about how fast these models have evolved and how it's largely a skill issue, which is funny because that's a term my son tells me. Like when he beats me in a video game, he's like, it's a skill issue, Dad. It's like if I lose in Mario Kart, I'm like, oh, it's the wrong character. He goes, no, skill issue. So apparently that's like the lingo right now. So he was saying it's a skill issue if you can't get value out of these models. There's this idea of token maxing, which is a very technical concept, but it actually makes a ton of sense. So every time you use one of these models, you're basically burning through tokens. So tokens is when a large language model does something or an agent does something, it's basically making predictions using tokens. Tokens are like pieces of words in essence. And so you get an allotment of these tokens. So let's say I use 1 million, 2 million tokens, whatever. So he was saying like, if you're an engineer, you want to know what your token budget is. Like how much AI can I use in my job? And so this idea of token maxing is like, for the average user like you and me, Mike, I have a Claude license, I have a ChatGPT license, and I have a Gemini license. And if I'm not maxing out my subscription every month, I'm leaving like intelligence and outcomes on the table. And so he was saying there's this like pressure right now, especially on coders, to max out your available tokens. Because if you don't, you're just like, you're not getting the full value. And I think that concept is going to start carrying over eventually into knowledge work where you're like, we have these AI tools, we're not fully utilizing them, and we're leaving value on the table by not maxing out our tokens each month. And in a similar place, he talked about this idea of running projects in parallel, which I do. Like I'll go into Claude and be like, okay, I'm going to give it this project. Then I'm going to go over to ChatGPT and I'll have it work on this project. And so there's times where I'm running 3 projects simultaneously with AI agents while I'm doing my other work. So like I'm doing email or I'm doing something else, and so that's a big thing. And then he talked about the compression of timelines to complete projects, which I'm going to talk about in a upcoming topic here about our company retreat. But I think that's a very important concept, that things that used to take 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours now might take 5 minutes. And that's a weird environment to be working within. And then he also talked simultaneously about this idea of compression of software stacks, where we used to have a CRM tool and a social tool and all these tools. And it's like, I'm just going to have a swarm of agents and they're going to go talk to all this software. And I'm just going to have like a single user interface. And then the final one I'll say with Karpathy, and again, this is all relevant to what these labs are doing. So if you listen to the Karpathy interview, all the labs are realizing what Karpathy is realizing on agentic capabilities. And they are now in a race to do what he explains in this. And that's why this podcast episode is so important, that No Priors episode. He is telling you point blank what all the labs are trying to do with agents. And you will walk away with a better understanding of the moment. But then he said at one point, working with these agents is like simultaneously talking to a PhD student and a 10-year-old. So like sometimes you do something with it and it's like, it was like giving it to a top PhD student. And then the next moment, it's like some stupid, simple thing and it just can't do it. So it's that idea of the jagged frontier and the jaggedness of these models. So zoom out, recap. All the labs realized what Claude Code unlocked. And it wasn't like it was the first coding agent. It was just the best. They did something different with the harness, like how they enabled it to do what it does. All these labs see not the finish line, but like the next mile marker, I'll say, of agentic capability and their ability to automate AI research and their ability to then, as Logan Kilpatrick's deleted tweet said, to start disrupting everything. And so it is an all-out race for agents, and they're seeing a pot of gold with enterprise adoption, which is why Anthropic and OpenAI are doing deals with PE firms. It's why they're doing alliances with major consulting firms. They're trying to get in and get where this is going to be, because the labor replacement value of being the model they go to when they reduce workforces and put it all into AI models to token max to get work done. They see that future coming very fast. And it's important. Like if I just covered a lot in like 20 minutes here, I think it's very, very important that you understand what we just covered. Like that's what these labs are doing, and it's going to become very apparent, I think, in the next like 3 to 6 months that this is full go where they're headed.
Probably a pretty good time to be an enterprise buying AI technology. I'm assuming these labs would like to court you.
Yeah, you get a lot of credits, especially if you're like, I'll give you the first $1 million free. All the labs realized what Claude Code unlocked. And it wasn't like it was the first coding agent. It was just like, because the labor replacement value of being the model they go to when they reduce workforces and put it all into AI models to token max to get work done, they see that future coming very fast. And it's important. Like if I just covered a lot in like 20 minutes here, I think it's very, very important that you understand what we just covered. Like that's what these labs are doing, and it's going to become very apparent, I think, in the next like 3 to 6 months that this is full go where they're headed.
Probably a pretty good time to be an enterprise buying AI technology. I'm assuming these labs would like to court you.
Yeah, you get a lot of credits, especially if you're like, I'll give you the first $1 million free.
All right, next up, we've got 3 separate developments this week that are painting an increasingly complicated picture of how Americans actually feel about AI and how Washington is responding. So first, we had some new polling. David Shore, who is head of data science at Blue Rose Research, appeared on the Odd Lots podcast with some interesting polling data. So his organization has found that over the past year, AI rose in issue importance, and its importance as an issue, faster than any issue his firm tracks. It is now more important to voters than climate change, childcare, and abortion. According to their polling, 79% of voters are concerned the government doesn't have a plan to protect workers from AI job losses. 77% are concerned about entire industries being eliminated. 56% are worried about personally losing their job to AI. This is hitting at a time when 61% of Americans say life has gotten less affordable in the last year. Only 25% feel confident in their financial future. Only 34% say that in their opinion, they have a secure job. So what Shore's data shows, and he's pulling from this perspective of trying to kind of find political messaging for the Democratic Party, is that this whole idea of, hey, everything's going to work out just fine, that message is dead on arrival. They actually found when leaders in government and tech say AI will not cause widespread job losses, net trust is negative 41. And when they say AI will create economic productivity that benefits everyone, net trust is negative 20. Now, you're starting to see this play out across the political spectrum because we, second up this week, got dueling AI political declarations. So first, there was a coalition that involves a lot of unlikely bedfellows, including Steve Bannon, Susan Rice, Richard Branson, Ralph Nader, Yoshua Bengio, and others who released the Pro-Human AI Declaration. This basically called for a prohibition on superintelligence development until there's broad scientific consensus it can be done safely, as well as a number of other manifesto points about keeping AI pro-human. So over 40 organizations signed this. And they also found in their own polling that Americans would rather prefer human control over the speed of AI development by an 8-to-1 ratio. However, another organization called Build American AI published a direct counter to this manifesto titled "We Cannot Afford to Pause AI." They argued safety and innovation are not opposites, and the U.S. already has regulatory tools through existing authorities to manage AI development. Now, third, the Trump administration unveiled a national AI legislative framework with 7 pillars. This is a short document, but basically gives legislative guidance on how they think legislation should evolve related to AI. And this framework takes a pretty clear try first rather than regulate first posture. It opposes creating any new federal AI regulatory bodies. It defers copyright questions to the courts rather than legislating. And it recommends Congress preempt state AI regulations that impose undue burdens on developers, establishing what it calls Americans' quote, right to compute. There's an interesting part in here in shifting responsibility for protecting children online from tech companies to parents. So rather than imposing strict industry standards, they are actually shifting more to empowering parents with tools to protect kids online. The framework also calls for Congress to empower Americans to challenge federal agency efforts to, quote, dictate the information provided by an AI platform. So basically trying to make sure that there is no undue influence on what information is provided by AI. So Paul, I'm curious, there's a number of threads going on here. If you're in the AI industry or just observing or trying to navigate these changes yourself, how are you thinking about these numbers and the moves on either end of the political spectrum?
Like any research, we always talk about, you got to know who's doing the research and what their goal is, what kind of bias might be in the research. That being said, it's going to become more political. And as we've said many times in recent months, this is all trial balloons. They're trying to figure out, what do Americans think about AI? And is there an opportunity to move votes a few percentage points one way or the other with taking a strong position on AI, which Republicans and Democrats haven't really for the most part with voters. So the one thing that is becoming more interesting to me is, I always read this research and think these people don't know what AI is. Like, you're asking them questions about something that they don't understand. And now I'm actually thinking out loud here of like, that's maybe an advantage for politicians that want to manipulate and persuade people to vote one way or the other. So if you don't know what it is, then you can create the perception of
whatever you want.
100%.
Yeah.
So if people generally like, I don't know, like whatever, then it's like, okay, let's hammer the message of it's going to take jobs and data centers are going to ruin communities. And now that's all AI is to people. So this is maybe a dangerous slope we're going down here, where we're seeing the early efforts to try and gauge what is perception so that we can then influence perception of what it is to move votes one way or the other. So David Shore, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his organization. So that's always the first thing I do. It's like, okay, we see some cool data and it's getting shared everywhere on X. Who are these people is always the first thing I ask. What is their mission? So David Shore is head of data science at Blue Rose Research, based in New York, originally from Miami. I try to elect Democrats. That is his X profile. So what I just read is his X profile. So there's no hiding what the point of this is. Blue Rose Research helps campaigns make higher quality strategic decisions by democratizing access to accurate measurement. That's on their About Us page. The name Blue Rose symbolizes turning blue what is now red. So again, there's no hiding what this is for. David Shore is a prominent American data scientist, political consultant, and expert in public opinion polling. Now, that doesn't mean it's not valid research. We're just saying there's a perspective here. That's the whole point of understanding this. He actually worked for Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. So the survey, just to put it in a little bit of context, when it says AI is like the fastest growing issue, you have to understand it's actually 29th out of 39 issues right now, though.
Right.
So yes, it's growing fast, but the top 5 issues for Americans are cost of living, the economy, political corruption, inflation, and healthcare. Those don't really move. Those are pretty common top 5. Then if you go down to like 25 to 30, so just to put in context of where AI falls, you have war in the Middle East at 25, international trade, income inequality, voting rights, then artificial intelligence, then race relations. So while it is growing fast, on the surface, Americans don't really care. Like it is not something that would jump out to you as like votes are going to move based on that. But it is changing fast. You talked about some of these key ones, Mike. The government not having a plan to protect workers from job loss driven. So the question was, how concerned are you about? And then it said the government not having a plan to protect workers from job losses driven by AI, 79%. So you don't need to understand what AI is to it kind of worries me that I don't have a plan. And that is 100% true. They do not have a plan. Or if they have a plan, they're certainly not talking about the plan. So everyone should be concerned that the government doesn't have a plan. Then it said, how concerned are you about young people entering the workforce and finding fewer job opportunities because of AI? 79%. They should be concerned. That's happening. That is a real thing right now. So again, whoever's asking these questions, Republican, Democrat, Independent, doesn't matter. That is a fact. It's harder to find jobs right now. Entire industries being eliminated by AI faster than new ones are created. That's a ridiculous question. We're not getting rid of industries. Companies being disrupted, sure. Career paths. So that's an absurd question. You could just throw that one away. AI changing the job market in a way that drives down wages for people like you, 72%. You could replace AI with any variable. Anything you ask is are you concerned with something driving wages down? Well, of course I'm concerned. I don't want my wages going down. So it's whatever. You or someone in your family losing their job in the next year because of AI, 56%. That's a reasonable concern. And then when they say when leaders in government and tech industry say AI will not cause widespread job losses, net trust, as you mentioned, is negative 41. Distrust it somewhat, 35%. Distrust it completely, 32%. So 67% distrust it somewhat or completely. Now, that may align with 67% of people don't believe anything government tells you. So I have no idea. Right. So again, just framing where the data is coming from. Then there was another one, Data for Progress, which is a progressive think tank and polling firm that provides data, research, and messaging strategies for progressive movement. They produce polling on policy issues and support campaigns. So they came out with new research on February 27th, which is worth mentioning here. This is 1,200 U.S. likely voters nationally using a web panel. So they're asking about how frequently they use AI in their daily lives, whether they have favorable or unfavorable views of the tech, and how confident they are in their ability to spot AI-generated content. This is a pretty short survey. We'll put the link in. It's only 5 pages. You can read it for yourself if you want. But some of these questions are pretty interesting. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the following people or institutions? They asked about AI. Democrats -3 net favorable, Republicans +11, Independents -5. They asked when it comes to AI tools such as ChatGPT. So now again, they're trying to qualify for you what are we talking about when we talk about AI. So if you understand what ChatGPT is, at least you have some concept. When it comes to it in your personal life, have you mostly embraced or resisted using them to assist your life? Or have you found areas where you could use AI in your personal life? Embraced, Democrats 32, Democrats 34, Republicans 32. Resisted, Democrats 35, Republicans 33. And then I have not found areas that I could use AI in my life. Democrats 30, Republicans 32, which is totally balanced. There's really nothing there that would indicate, anything they can do with that data or to move people one way or the other. Then they had another one. Sometimes people use AI to make fake or edited photos and videos that they post online. How confident you feel in your ability to spot that stuff. Very confident, 15%. Somewhat confident, 35%. So that's 50% think they can figure it out.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, right.
That they can. Yeah, they're not. They're wrong.
Yeah.
But And then they did an interesting one where they were like comparing data from August 2025 to February 2026, where they asked how frequently, if at all, do you use the following using AI such as ChatGPT for your job? So right now, 14 say multiple times a day, 44 rarely or never, 11 a few times a month. So you have 55% of these people being polled in February 2026 that few times a month, rarely or never. So again, if you like think everybody's doing this, they're not. And then the one you mentioned about the pro-human AI declaration, again, it's important to kind of know where the counter is coming from. So the AI industry super PACs, we talked about this last year, CNBC had this as well as others, that there's a super PAC called Leading the Future. And the contributors to this are Andreessen Horowitz, OpenAI co-founder Greg Brockman, Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale, and Angel founder, SV Angel founder Ron Conway, and AI software company Perplexity. So these are people like pushing the super PAC, which is all about acceleration. It's all about like rapidly accelerating what's going on. And they're basically saying that this stuff is ridiculous. So the Build America AI is in essence like led by this group, and they're saying we cannot afford to pause AI. So this is a TechCrunch piece highlights the reason of the pro-human AI declaration, the document you mentioned. The goals behind that effort are understandable. People want AI to be safe and they want clear rules. Those are fair concerns, but this is still the wrong direction. So this is the super PAC people. Pausing frontier AI development will not solve the problems its supporters claim it will solve. If anything, it risks making several of them worse. It would slow the research that helps us understand how these systems behave and practice and weaken Americans' position at the exact moment our adversaries are investing heavily in advanced technology. We cannot hand hostile actors on the world stage a strategic edge. That is what would occur if we paused AI. And then that leads to the AI legislative framework from the government, which is just the starting point. That's the most important thing to take away from that. It's just like guidance on where they think legislation should go. It's not doing anything yet. Right. But you covered some of it. It's like protecting children, safeguarding and strengthening American communities, respecting intellectual property rights. That's a really funny choice of words. Respecting intellectual property rights, meaning they don't want you to have property rights as a creator, and supporting creators, preventing censorship and protecting free speech, enabling innovation, and ensuring American AI dominance. That's probably the most important one, and because all the other ones fall under that one. And then educating Americans and developing an AI-ready workforce, which I'm definitely intrigued to hear what they've got in mind there. So, yeah, again, it's just, I think what we're seeing, we've said this like recently, every week there's now going to be more and more on the political side. We are moving into the midterms. We are moving into the moment where the political parties have to decide whether or not Americans care. And this election cycle is either going to be all about AI or it's just going to like fade away. Yeah. And you're seeing the push towards data centers being bad, job loss being bad. And then you've got the Leading the Future super PAC people who are like, all of it's great and it's all going to create an abundant future for all of us. And if you don't believe that, then believe we have to beat China. Like that's basically the messaging. You know, it's like choose your fighter. Like that's, and you know, I don't know where the middle ground is here, but right now neither side really knows. But the super PAC, the Leading the Future people they're going to push hard on this stuff, and they're going to try and make you believe it's all going to work out and jobs aren't going to be lost. And you always have to, what I would just encourage people to do is like, don't get stuck in whatever your traditional political silos are. You know, if you only listen to one perspective on this is an issue where you can't just be listening to one perspective that you've always followed. Right. I think it's really important to like realize neither political party knows the answer here. They're both trying to figure it out. And so it's really important that you open your own mind and like look behind who's saying things and what the goal they have behind saying that is, or where their research is coming from. It's going to be very important to try and keep a level head on this stuff and be listen to arguments of both sides.
To your point about people often being polled who don't know what AI actually is, that's the point of some of these numbers. We would throw out half these questions if we were doing actual research. Yes. But if they surface a strong opinion or view on AI, even if that view is wrong, that's really useful polling to certain people, because it tells you exactly what you need to say and hit on, using that ignorance almost as a weapon in some ways.
Yes, facts and lies mean nothing in election cycles. It's all about what can you say that'll get you to remain in power. And that's, again, I don't think that's like a controversial perspective.
Right.
It is what it is. Like, I can tell you whatever you want to hear to stay in power or to get in power, both sides. So form your own opinion, like form your own informed understanding of the situation. And then from there, you can take more logical actions to make sure, you understand, I don't know, it's like a situational awareness, I guess, about what's happening with this issue. It's going to become a major issue, I think. I think they're going to find the levers to pull. They're going to find the wedges to create frustration and anxiety around AI, and that could get very dicey.
Our third big topic this week is about, Paul, this SmarterX annual meeting and retreat we had over the last couple days of last week with our team. So this was super inspiring. We spent a couple days together collaborating. Day one, we talked about vision, goals, KPIs, priorities, and growth initiatives. Day two, we ran AI productivity and AI innovation workshops, which are designed to accelerate responsible AI adoption across business units and teams. And the reason we wanted to cover this and dive into it is because it has some signals, maybe some lessons here about overall company transformation with AI. Because, Paul, I'll let you kind of unpack this for us, because what we were able to achieve over just 2 days, both in how we were approaching AI and by actually using the technology, I think can teach us quite a bit about how AI is changing the way businesses operate.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. And Mike, you and I haven't talked about this. So if you have other perspectives or things to add, let me know. But yeah, the reason we wanted to highlight this is a few things came to me. So it was like 2 days. There was a part of me that thought it was a great example of what you can do with the time you gain from AI. So the fact that we use AI so intelligently within our own business gives us a little freedom to say, yeah, let's take a full 2 days. Like, let's go do this thing. Let's go think, let's go spend time together, build camaraderie, like do all the things we should be doing. And as I was sitting there, I kept thinking, like, we got to do more of this. Like, when I think, what does an AI forward company look like, and how do you take the benefits you gain from AI, the efficiency and productivity gains, and redistribute that in some way? I'm not a 4-day work week guy. I don't think that's reality. I do love the idea, though, of like, let's do more of this. Let's have like once a month, let's just take like an afternoon and just think and talk and like work on big ideas. Like, I find that to be more like enables the work to be more fun and more fulfilling if it's not just let's token max every minute of every day. So I think there's like in some ways I want to build I want to maximize what we can do, but I also want to make sure we're getting the benefits of it. It's not like a race to some end game or like some competitive race. So yeah, the way we set it up was day one was, as you mentioned, sort of the company day. There's vision, goals, KPIs, building scorecards, a rocks workshop where we're setting priorities for the coming quarter. And then I think just like the thing we teach, which is setting expectations for everyone of what an AI forward professional looks like. And in some ways modeling that by showing in real time how we're using AI and making sure everyone on the team understands the capabilities. So Mike, you did on day two, you led off with this AI productivity workshop. And you talked about the idea of not only jobs as tasks, but tasks as workflows, which I loved that framing. And then you went through like an AI capabilities overview of like, what are all these things the models can do, so that people started to think a little bit differently about their own daily lives at work. We demoed Jobs GPT, Campaigns GPT, and Innovations GPT. I did that one in mine. But those are some of the free custom GPTs we've built that we make publicly available. We use them in our own teams. Like, we literally use these tools to train our own teams. And as an example of like this AI forward idea in real time. So Mike's doing his workshop, which was awesome because I've never sat through one of Mike's workshops. So Mike and I do these things all the time for other companies. We do them at our Macon event, but like, we don't have time to sit in each other's workshops. So he's doing this workshop and he's showing AI kind of layering over workflows and reimagining workflows. And he showed this AI capability slide. And then he turned it into, it was like a spreadsheet with like 90 rows or something.
Like 90 different capabilities and features across some of the major AI tools. So you can quickly like pick and choose and filter and map things to all the individual tasks you're doing as part of a workflow, for instance.
So like reasoning capabilities,
Right.
video capabilities. So yeah, it's like, so I was like, I love this. And I was looking at this thing. I'm like, I wonder if we could turn this into something. So as he's talking, I take the spreadsheet and I put it into Claude Code or just Claude, and I'm using Sonnet 4.6 at this point. And I said, help me visualize this. We want it to help professionals understand the full capabilities of today's leading AI models so they can apply them to their work. That was the entire prompt. So it did it, and I was like, this is really cool. And I said, is there a way to turn this into an app that I can demo internally? So like 3 minutes later, I had this functioning app. So Mike doesn't know this is happening. He's just on stage doing his thing. But the best part, and this, I'm still like trying to wrap my head around this. Mike, we don't have a Claude license for the team. So when Mike built his capabilities slide, it was what, Google?
So Google Gemini, ChatGPT, Notebook LM, and I spun out kind of deep research for both tools as kind of its own capability set.
Right. Okay, so this 90-row worksheet does not have Claude in it. But I'm talking to Claude to build this interactive demo. So Claude says, it first asked me a question, how would you want to share run it? And I said standalone HTML files, fine. It then said, what should people be able to do beyond browsing? Select all that apply. And then I just simplistically, I was like, just browse, that's enough. Then this is the question that blew my mind. It said, should Claude be included as a fourth tool? So it was aware that it wasn't part of the spreadsheet he created. And it asked me if it should add itself to the spreadsheet. I literally laughed out loud when I saw this. I was like, what? And so I said, yes, add Claude. Great. And it did. And it followed the exact model he had done for the other. And then it built this interactive capability thing. It honestly blew my mind. And as I say, like, we do this stuff every day. I see this stuff every day. And there's still moments where I'm like, I can't even believe it was capable of doing this in real time. And so when I say Claude is like running circles around what some of these other apps are capable of doing, AI systems are capable of doing, this is a perfect example of it.
Yeah, you one-shotted a 90-item capability database, more than 90 because it added in probably 25 different things from Claude. One-shotted it in a way that genuinely was professionally designed, extremely intuitive. It was great. It was finished. It was a finished experience. Yeah.
Unbelievable. So the other one I'll share, and again, we'll touch on some of this kind of later on, was rocks. And I put this on LinkedIn on Sunday, and I actually featured this in my newsletter, the Exec AI Insider newsletter. So I'm just going to read what I wrote because it summarizes it really well. So I basically was saying, like, we went through this retreat, and like one of the things that became apparent to me as an example was this idea of rocks. So we use a modified version of rocks from the EOS system, in which departments and individuals establish 3 to 5 priorities per quarter, and then the rocks allow us to align our time, energy, resources on what matter most, and it provides transparency. So if I want to see what are like the 5 things Mike's working on in Q2, I can go, or if I want to go see what the studio that Mike leads is doing, I can go see that. So the thing that became abundantly clear to me is the time to complete rocks is compressing, and that it requires a complete rethinking of business operating systems. So for example, during a live session where I was actually demoing, so this is part of the company day, I was demoing a new AI assessment tool we're developing that I'll share more about in probably a month or two. So I had used Anthropic Claude Code, again, Sonnet 4.6, in real time to build an interactive reporting dashboard that visualized and analyzed responses from 17 people. So I had built this assessment in Google Forms as like an MVP. And then Mike and I tested it the day before retreat just to make sure it worked. And so I had my data and Mike's data, and then I had everybody else take it. And then I exported that CSV from Google Sheets. So that was it. That was like the entire process. You did zero coding, zero design abilities to do this thing. And I give this to Claude. And I said, so this is while we were taking a lunch break. I ran this. So here's my prompt. I had 17 team members take the assessment. Can you come up with an elegant way to visualize the results based on the format model you already created? So I had to create one for me and Mike. And the CSV is attached. So in a previous life, which I said like AKA 3 months ago, before Claude Code really started working, this would have been my entire Q2 rock, like create an interactive dashboard to visualize assessment results for teams. I would have spent 10 to 20 hours researching dashboards and developing a brief. Then I would have invested time and money hiring a designer and a developer to conceptualize, build, iterate on the design and capabilities. Then we would have gone through weeks of internal testing and revisions. And then maybe by the end of Q2, I would have actually had a minimum viable product that I could demonstrate to the team and pilot with users. Instead, in about 5 minutes, while I got a plate of pasta, Claude did the entire thing with one prompt, and the final product was beyond anything we could have possibly created. And I told Mike, I was like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do it. And then he and I are both just like waiting. Like, we go check the laptop. Like, did it do it? Did it do it? It was insane. It was totally interactive, better than anything I could have possibly designed myself or work with a developer to build. And I'm now going to use that to actually turn it over to a developer and say, here, let's build this and like take this, live in like 30 days, hopefully. So, yeah, we share this as a little bit of like behind the scenes of how we think about SmarterX as like an AI native company, like event and media and education company. And two, just to like bring to life the fact that you don't need any coding ability to all of a sudden now just build stuff. And it's totally compressing the timelines to do everything in business. And it's changing the way every day that I think about how to run our own company and how to advise other people to build their companies.
Yeah, I would argue we have quite well done and clear and ambitious rocks, at least, in our department that we were working on during this workshop. But yeah, it is actually kind of laughable that all 5 of them should take 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, I really think my guidance to the team was like 5. I want you to have like 5 for your department. Yeah. I actually think you need 20. Because
right.
And you need like some categorical thing of like, hey, this is, this would take 10 to 20 hours of human labor. We think we can do it in 10 minutes. Like there are honestly things that are just going to be like that. There's going to be all these like quick win rocks where it's like, well, it used to be 3 months worth of work, but it's probably 3 days now with mostly AI. It's like level 3 AI. Like it's going to do most of the work. So the companies that figure that out and realize that and restructure how they're building everything stand to do really well.
And just 2 final really quick notes here, but to piggyback on what you did with AI during these workshops. So the AI capabilities map I built, which was, again, like 90-ish rows of all these different capabilities and features, that's a lot to figure out on your own. And what's really cool is I determined the framework I wanted to use and worked back and forth with Claude to say, okay, what's the most sensible way to organize these once we have them? I don't have them yet. And then it's like, okay, we've got a really solid system. How do I get them? Typically, you might go do a bunch of research. You might have to sort through all sorts of documentation. I just went into each tool and screenshotted all my menu options and dropped them into Claude and said, guess what? We're going to go create a spreadsheet based on the framework that you and I came up with and go have at it. And then it basically one-shots a 90-row spreadsheet. It's incredible. And same type of thing during your innovation workshop. I fed Claude a lot of different context about my department, the Content Studio, some of my context around our organization, and then using your framework that you developed, layered that on top of that context and what Claude is now able to do, and got better innovation ideas than I could have come up with, first on my own at all, and second, in an entire day. I did it in like 20 minutes. So it's so powerful, not only just using the right tools, of course, but having these proven frameworks and models and ways of thinking layered over them, all that stuff we've spent lots of time developing as like IP or as unique models to approach these things with in our workshops. It's like rocket fuel at this stage.
Yeah, and I think there's just something like a lesson to be taken from how we structured it, because obviously our team's probably more informed than most teams about AI capabilities, but honestly, like I don't know that they even were aware of a lot of the things these models could do.
Yeah.
And so it was very intentional how we did this, and I would advise other companies to think about a similar model where you have this kind of like state of AI, like what is it capable of? And that's often what I'll go in and do with enterprises. Like I'll do like a state of AI for business, and here's the capabilities, here's what you need to understand. Then you do the productivity workshop where it's like, how do we get efficiency and productivity in our tasks and workflows? Then we'll often do a problem solving one too. But like the innovation one is how we closed, and I intentionally wanted to close with that. Because once you understand what it's capable of, and once you've solved like the lower level efficiency and productivity things, now you open your mind to the possibilities. And I mean, and then we go around the room and each person gives us like 1 or 2 innovations they're super excited about. So then you leave after 2 days actually feeling like ready to go, not like drained. It's like, okay, that was amazing. I want to go do those things now. Right. And that was like people are coming up to me, it's like, okay, can we do these things that we just talked about? So I think it's a really cool format for people. And so if you're trying to get your team on board, borrow that format of like, make sure they're understanding of it. And if you need help with it, give us a call. This is like what Mike and I do all the time. We run boot camps and workshops, and so if nothing else, we can advise you on ways to do it. But if you're a big enterprise and you need help with it, just like we can come in and do stuff like that too.
All right, Paul. Before we dive into rapid fire, quick message here. This episode is also brought to you this week by our upcoming webinar with. All right, let's dive into rapid fire, Paul. So first up, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella is taking some more direct control of the company's Copilot product, personally overseeing a restructuring that consolidates consumer and commercial Copilot into a single organization. Jacob Andro, a former Snap SVP who joined Microsoft last year, now reports directly to Nadella as the new EVP leading Copilot experience across both segments. The restructuring frees up Mustafa Suleiman, the DeepMind co-founder who became CEO of Microsoft AI in 2024, to focus entirely on what he calls the company's super intelligence efforts. This move apparently comes as Copilot trails quite badly in the AI assistant race. Copilot has 6 million daily active users compared to ChatGPT's 440 million. That is, according to a CNBC article. Gemini has 82 million. Claude has 9 million. Nadella wrote to employees that Microsoft is doubling down on our super intelligence mission with the talent and compute to build models that have real product impact. So, Paul, what does this tell you about where Microsoft is headed with AI? Like, reading this, I was like, I know it sounds like Mustafa is excited, but this feels more like he's getting sidelined and we need to get real serious about Copilot real quick, which is kind of what we've heard anecdotally from users of Copilot.
Yeah, there's lots of variables going on here. I mean, one is the shift in their relationship with OpenAI. They were obviously a major investor in OpenAI. They're a major equity holder. I think it's somewhere around like 27% they own of OpenAI. But all of their efforts were being built on top of OpenAI's models. And now, again, if you go look at what we were just talking.
Okay, so we're diving back, and we're trying to get this done as soon as possible so that we can go into a different channel that we have where we talk about psychological types and Jungian psychological functions. But we're diving in. We're diving in.
Well, with Claude, it's like you're almost at a disadvantage as an organization if you can't use, when a breakthrough happens, when somebody builds just a better thing, you're at a disadvantage if you can't use that thing. And so if Microsoft was stuck using OpenAI technology and all of a sudden Claude races ahead in some really important component, that's not great. And then if you're Microsoft and you're one of the 3 biggest companies in the world, the fact that you aren't building your own models is probably a disadvantage moving forward. And so I think there was this shift where they realized that probably, a year and a half, 2 years ago, that they were going to have to remove their reliance on OpenAI. It probably happened the day Sam got fired, when that became like, oh boy, we are all eggs in one basket, and like it could go bad real fast. So, I think there's been this ongoing shift where they knew they needed to invest in their own technology, build their own models. They need to have kind of an off-ramp over time from their reliance on OpenAI. And then in November of last year, they announced this humanist superintelligence movement. So we talk about it in episode 179, which was on November 11th. But Mustafa had tweeted, it shouldn't be controversial to say AI should always remain in human control, that we humans should remain at the top of the food chain. That means we need to start getting serious about guardrails now before superintelligence is too advanced for us to impose them. And then there was, linking to an article from November 6th that was called Towards Humanist Superintelligence, where he said at Microsoft AI, we're working towards humanist superintelligence, incredibly advanced AI capabilities that always work for, in service of people and humanity more generally. So again, we've kind of known this was happening. At that time, I think I pulled what I said. I said, maybe Mustafa stays at Microsoft to realize this vision, but I can't help but feel like this vision will eventually clash with the need to justify their investments in AI. And so I think what they're basically saying is, you go focus on this stuff, focus on the future and the building of this thing, but Copilot is critical to our business right now, and it is not where we want it to be. And that now needs to get much closer to Satya. And that's basically, I think, what has happened here. I have no idea if Mustafa stays and keeps doing what he's doing, if they really do believe in this humanist superintelligence thing. But that, I don't see like Wall Street loving the humanist superintelligence. Right. I don't think stock price is going up because of that blog post or that vision. They want to know how you're going to compete with Claude and work with Anthropic, and that's all that Wall Street's going to care about. And at the end of the day, Satya and Microsoft have a fiduciary responsibility to return shareholder value, and I don't think that messaging plays. So I don't know. We'll see. It fits into that whole thing I started off with, where like these AI labs are shifting focus, and you're going to see a lot of reorgs, a lot of like, they tried something, it didn't work. Like Meta burned $10 billion on the metaverse and changed their name to be Meta, and it's done. Like, so just there's going to be lots of big efforts, big misses, and you got to move quick when it doesn't work. And I think this is an example of that.
Not to mention, anyone who's a Wall Street analyst of any type is almost certainly using Microsoft Excel and thus Copilot and sees it firsthand. So you better
or they used Claude in Excel and realized it was better than Microsoft's.
You're right. That's what I'm saying, right? They have a very close experience with perhaps some of the inadequacies of this tool.
Yeah.
All right, next up, an AI agent inside Meta took unauthorized action last week that triggered an actual security breach at the company. So an employee used an in-house agentic AI to analyze a colleague's question on an internal forum. So pointed the AI at the question, said, analyze this for me. The agent then posted a response to the question on its own without being directed to do so. The second employee followed the agent's advice, sparking a domino effect that gave some engineers access to Meta systems they should not have been able to see. The security breach was active for 2 hours before it was contained. A Meta representative confirmed the incident and said no user data was mishandled, though the company's internal report noted unspecified additional issues that contributed to the breach. A source told the information there was no evidence anyone exploited the unauthorized access or that data was made public, though the reporting notes that may have been the result of dumb luck more than anything else. The agent had also passed every identity check in Meta's system. That exposes some pretty serious fundamental gaps we might talk about in enterprise identity and access management. So, Paul, I'm curious, how close are most companies to having this kind of thing happen to them?
I don't know, but it's certainly a very viable thing. This is why I said in recent episodes, you got to listen to IT. I mean, there's a reason why some enterprises are moving really slow, especially when it comes to adoption of agents. And like, we talked about the Jensen thing where, he was like, OpenClaw is like the ChatGPT. And I was like, okay, maybe, but you know how hard it's going to be in enterprises to do anything close to what that does? This is the exact issue. And we just talked on episode 203 about something similar happening with Amazon, where it just like went rogue and started doing everything. And I think I joked at the time, like, we could just do a rogue AI agent episode segment every week. Like, this is going to be a recurring theme, and it's going to become a major issue. The concerns around oversight and governance of these agents, and then these agent swarms that are just given access to stuff, and the breakdown you might then see in permissions controls. We had this conversation at our own company meeting. It's like, can we connect this to that? Can we connect that to this? And it's like, no, because I don't know yet the risks associated with that. So yeah, that's, again, it's one of these situations where the tech can do things, but it doesn't mean you should let the tech do things, because there's so many potential risks. So yeah, I mean, this is a crazy one. You should go like read the articles about it. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah, I must found this was like more notable because it happened. It wasn't like some super incredible agent just like giving access to it to your whole code base or whatever. It was just like a totally unintended consequence of something that's actually like probably a pretty normal use case on the surface, saying, hey, let me use AI to analyze a question one of my colleagues posted on a forum. And then you're like, oh no. I realized that now this thing can choose what to do and how to do it. And that's like totally a weird way to start thinking here, right?
Yep. Yeah, and again, go listen to the Andrej Karpathy, No Priors podcast episode, and you'll understand this stuff at a deeper level. He talks a lot about these risks, and even himself not knowing. He talked about like setting it up to run his house. He's like, oh yeah, I gave it to access to, I was like, go find Sonos. And it like goes into his network and finds the Sonos speakers, and then it goes to the security and he just gave it access to everything. And he like, Dobby the elf, he calls it. Dobby the home elf. Yeah, it's hilarious. So again, this is a recurring theme. It's really important to understand where agents are going, where these agent swarms are going, how they'll eventually be used to run organizations, and how some people are willing to be out on the edges right now, setting these things up and connecting them to their own company data. And we're all going to learn plenty of lessons from their early efforts.
All right, in our next rapid fire topic this week, the Anthropic versus Pentagon saga continues. The Department of War has fired back at Anthropic's lawsuits in a 40-page filing in California federal court. The Pentagon calls Anthropic a, quote, unacceptable risk to national security, arguing the company might attempt to disable its technology or preemptively alter the behavior of its model during warfighting operations if its corporate red lines are being crossed. Recently now, nearly 150 retired federal and state judges appointed by both Republicans and Democrats have also filed their own amicus brief supporting Anthropic. We talked last week about how tech companies like Microsoft and Apple have all filed their own briefs, basically arguing that this designation of Anthropic as a supply chain risk could mean the entire government procurement system becomes contingent on political favor rather than the rule of law. So, Paul, the big piece here is really this idea that a bunch of ex-judges are coming out and saying that they also support Anthropic in this. We have talked about if this is going to get resolved anytime soon. There's a hearing on whether or not to grant Anthropic some temporary relief that's actually set for March 24th, the date this comes out. Where do we stand with this?
I don't know. The only context Mike I'll add is I think it's just still this like he said, she said thing, like where the government's saying one thing and they're doing the other thing like behind the scenes, but they're trying to like, give this perception that they're all in the right here, and Anthropic is this horrible company and it's this huge risk. So there was a tweet thread from Roger Parloff, who's a senior editor at Lawfare. And I'll put the link in. He said, some Anthropic updates on March 4th, just hours before Hegseth declared Anthropic a supply chain risk, allegedly due to threats of sabotage and data exfiltration. His undersecretary wrote Anthropic, and he had the screenshot of the email, that they were very close to a deal, asking to change a prepositional phrase. So while Hegseth's getting ready to like go on and blast them on X and say they're done, they're actually still negotiating behind the scenes, and they have screenshots of it. Then, since then, the government has claimed that Anthropic sought a veto over Department of Defense actions, but two top Anthropic officials assert it never did. And this is actually like legally, they submitted briefing saying this is not what happened. Similarly, government's purported fear that Anthropic might disrupt the military was never raised with the company and is a technical impossibility. So they actually explain, like, we can't even do the thing they're claiming we would do. And then for Anthropic's refusal to allow its product to be used for autonomous lethal warfare and mass surveillance, Hegseth himself said those concerns were understandable, and the commander of the U.S. CENTCOM echoed those sentiments, Anthropic's head of policy rights. So they submitted these briefs saying, like, they agreed with us. Like, we weren't even, like, raising something that they didn't themselves think was an issue. And then he had one last update. In government's response, Tuesday, it backed away from the secondary boycott Hegseth called for in his February 27th, quote, final decision post on X, admitting it was lawless, but also taking no responsibility for its devastating impact. The hearing is coming up on March 24th. So, so these are declarations, legal declarations from Anthropic's head of policy, Sarah Heck, submitted as part of their response to the case. And then their head of public sector. So, they're basically saying, like, well, here, I'll testify to, like, this never happened, or this is what they said. So the whole thing, as I've said many, many times, it's become this political thing. It's become a battle of egos on the government side. And, I think that everyone sort of sees through why they're actually doing this. And we'll, see what the courts have to say, I guess.
It's impossible to tell, but based on that new context, it almost sounds like there's one possibility where did, like, Hegseth jump the gun on tweeting about this when they were nearing a deal?
Shocking.
Yeah, right. So,
well, it's not jump the gun, but, like, claim some power that they actually don't have. Like,
right. Where, like, he's posting so aggressively when the deal's almost done before this all blows up, and now it's just, like, doubling down on a mistake, maybe. I don't know.
Right, or you're just going to do harm either way, so you don't really care if it's legal or not. It doesn't, like, It's the repercussions. Like, nothing's going to happen to me if I do this and say this, other than hurt that company and try and use it as leverage to get them to do what I want them to do, which is not be a unusual political tactic.
All right, next up, Google DeepMind has published a cognitive framework this week that attempts to answer the question, if AI actually achieved AGI, how would anyone know? So the team here proposes a cognitive taxonomy with what they claim are 10 measurable traits of general intelligence on which to measure AI and its progress towards AGI. And it's divided into two categories. So this first category covers 8 building blocks of human cognition: perception, generation, attention, learning, memory, metacognition, and executive functions. And these combine to form 2 composite faculties that DeepMind considers equally important, which are problem solving and social cognitions. They basically define these as the ability to process and interpret social information and respond appropriately in social situations. So their proposed test here is pretty straightforward. They want to run AI models and humans through the same cognitive benchmarks, and then they theorize you'd get a measurable estimate of when a single AI can meet or exceed human capabilities across all 10 of these areas. DeepMind actually launched a Kaggle hackathon with a $200,000 prize pool to crowdsource evaluations for the 5 areas where the gap between testing capabilities right now is the largest, which are learning, metacognition, attention, executive functions, and social cognition. So they say their goal is to move the conversation around AGI from one of subjective claims and speculation towards a grounded, measurable scientific endeavor. So, Paul, does this change anything about how we talk about AGI? Are we getting any closer to really defining what it is and actually measuring it?
Yeah, I mean, Google's DeepMind's done the best job of trying to get to that point. They had a paper last year that Shane Legg led on where he was trying to sort of define the different, general capabilities and performance and trying to put some way to measure it. So I like the effort to try and quantify it, making it more meaningful, try and get some maybe eventually universal agreement on what it is. The first thing I thought when I saw this is like, well, how do you not saturate these tests? Like when the models eventually learn what the tests are and just like I don't know how they would do that to keep them like sandbox so the model doesn't end up with the training data basically, that it eventually learns how to look like it has AGI because it just learned what the test was ahead of time. But I think the most important thing for our audience is that we just keep coming back to this. AGI is a really interesting topic. It's fascinating to sort of follow along progress towards it. It's a meaningless term related to what it does to impact your job, your company, the economy more broadly. So We don't need to reach AGI, whatever that definition is. We don't need to agree on a definition for AI to transform businesses, the economy, and society. This idea of capabilities overhang we talk about, that Andrej Karpathy episode that I mentioned touched on this quite a bit. But just go back to that example I shared of rocks. Like, if you have a company like ours that knows this stuff, we understand what AI capabilities are, and we look at an operating system of our company and we're like, oh, we're just going to reimagine the whole thing. Rather than 5 rocks a quarter, we think we do 15 or 20, like, easily. And here's how we're going to do it. So we understand the capabilities and we're applying them to the best of our ability. Then take some other company that doesn't even have Gen AI tools for their team yet. They haven't even got them Copilot licenses or ChatGPT licenses. Like, they've done no personalized training. They've never run a workshop internally. Like, they're not even taking advantage of any of the capabilities other than maybe using it as like an answer engine or a chatbot. So there's this overhang of, we have all these capabilities and so few companies are actually doing anything with them. Not just companies, educational institutions, governments, practitioners at an individual level. So that to me is the most important thing. So I'm all for this. I think like quantifying it so we can just get to the point where we agree on what it is makes total sense. But don't be misled by that or wait around for that definition. Be like, oh, okay, I'll worry about it when we get closer to AGI. It's already there.
All right, next up, Anthropic has published results from the largest multilingual qualitative study ever performed on AI attitudes. They did nearly 81,000 interviews with Claude users across 159 countries and 70 languages. So these conversations were actually conducted by Anthropic Interviewer, a variant of Claude trained specifically to conduct and then analyze interviews, which we have talked about in past episodes. Interestingly, they found out that the top fear of people expressed in these conversations is actually hallucination/unreliability of AI, which ranks as the #1 concern with 26.7% of people mentioning it. It is ahead of jobs and economic impact, which is at 22.3%. and loss of human autonomy and agency at 21.9%. Interestingly, Anthropic finds that people value AI often for the same capabilities that they fear most. So 50% of respondents experienced time savings from AI, yet 19% felt pressured to simply work faster as a result. 33% cited learning benefits, while 17% worried that it would actually facilitate more cognitive decline when you're relying on machines to think for you. And it's interestingly that people experiencing one side of attention are typically 3 times more likely to also worry about the other side, meaning these are kind of inherent contradictions in the same people using AI. Now, what's really cool is they actually asked what people actually want from AI. 18.8% of those who answered said that they seek first professional excellence from AI. 13.7% said they were seeking personal transformation. 13.5% said better life management, and 81% report experiencing some progress towards their vision in those areas. Paul, I'm interested what you took away from this data. Pretty interesting way they went about getting it.
It's the approach to research that I found most intriguing. So, I mean, the data is great. I do think, again, as I referenced earlier, you got to keep in mind, like, who are the people responding to these questions, things like that when you look at the data. So you're not just like, you're not making some broad assumptions. In December of 2025, before Claude Code really took off and before the government issues and before like this movement to where the Claude app became like the #1 app on the App Store, they have a heavy technical user base. Lots of like coders, lots of AI researchers using Claude. So when you're looking at this, even though it's 80,000 people across all these countries, it's still likely skewed toward a more technical user. So just for reference sake, that's important to keep in the back of your mind. So I love the approach, this like dynamic approach based on responses that adapts it. Not great news for people who run focus groups and who are like consumer research people for a living. This is definitely one of those ones where you're either adapting or the whole new way of doing research is going to kind of run you over. They said their next Anthropic Interviewer study, launching shortly to a small subset of Claude users, focuses on Claude's effects on people's well-being over time, whether Claude is actually making people's lives better in the ways they want and how it could do so more effectively, which I thought was interesting. And then they said this is a new form of social science. It is a qualitative research at a massive scale, and we're in the early stages of learning how to do it. Surveys and usage analysis tell us what people are doing with AI, but the open-ended interview format helps us get at a why. Conducting this research has moved us and challenged us. We did not expect so many deep, open
Okay, there you have it. We got to Dark Journalist, and we're gonna call it a day. 439 videos in ASAP 18.3. Currently sorted by date published, but we normally keep it to date added oldest. And there you have it. Until next time.